Well, let's get into the Satanic Panic Madness now. Really, how I got to sort of onto this particular topic, and I wish phone goes boom down in mute land here. Okay. Go away, phone. Why? Okay, no noise for you. So, Satanic Panic, sort of like the wacky tobacco or probably the weed craze, making people think that a certain thing, a certain belief, turns people into mad zombie like creatures that go after all sorts of other things. Now, got a couple of videos lined up. There's one really special one that I will save for the mid game. So, we're going to go into Satanic Panic. And Michelle remembers, but let's see what this one guy, has to say about it.
Public. The film most often connected to Satanic Panic would be the 1973 movie The Exorcist. Not long after it was in theaters, there were these stories about people being hysterical, fainting, vomiting, and having other strong reactions to the intensity of the film. Billy Graham denounced The Exorcist, which gave it even more attention and increased people's interest in the film. In a way, he also gave the film a mystique by suggesting that it emitted some type of evil energy. In addition to The Exorcist,
yes, it is a very interesting concept. I had a friend who was a Jehovah Witness, and they sort of had that quirky little belief that just by hearing or seeing things that have to do with satanic rituals or even depictions of Satan, that somehow Satan can get into your soul or something like that of another degree. Okay. Hola, Tiamont.
Yeah, that was kind of
Go.
late, but it's okay.
Okay, yes, that is perfectly fine for people to jump in whenever. Going over this one video, you're a little bit late, so I'm not letting you get your little speech in. But I hope you wake up a little bit if you were sleeping till now.
I wasn't sleeping as much as just doing
You were
it.
bullshitting, yes. Maybe you were communing with the devil or some other fun stuff like that. But let's start with a light topic to start with. And this guy starts with The Exorcist as a source. Maybe he'll move on.
many other horror movies came out in the mid and late 1970s. Just to name a few, The Omen and Carrie in 1976, The Exorcist II and The Sentinel in
I must point out, Carrie was sort of a reaction to pretty much people misconstruing the Satanic Panic with psychic abilities, dirty pillows. I think that was more of a combination. There's
Isn't
Carrie.
Carrie's the one to the infamous scene of the
Bloodbath. The pig.
the girl was like the pyromaniac based on the Stephen King book.
Absolutely, that is how that went out. But
And
yes,
she did she wanted revenge on her high school or something, and just
yeah, of course, she didn't even think about it. It was just an impulse, but it sort of played up the Satanic Panic, sort of in a certain regards.
So I remember The Omen. I mean, The Omen was the different Omen films were actually kind of interesting.
And there was also, of course, Rosemary's Baby. There was a whole bunch of stuff about.
I'm surprised you didn't mention Poltergeist.
Well, I don't. Maybe he will. Let's give the man a chance.
1977, Omen 2 and The Fury in 1978, The Legacy and The Amityville Horror in 1979. In 1980, we see The Changeling, The Hearse, and The Shining. The movies being played in the theaters may not have actually been the problem as far as Satanic Panic. It may have been the release on television several years later. In 1983, the
See, this seems a little bit weird already. He's attributing it mainly to movies from the start.
I mean, The Shining is about psychic abilities too.
Again, he's misreading it, yes, but it could have played into that sort of
Because that's why
yeah, that's why, as I said, with Carrie, it really wasn't anything about Satan. But it did have ghosts. But you brought up a good point that Poltergeist wasn't mentioned, but this guy might be a little bit off, or he might be just brushing over the media aspects.
It's totally okay to have that medium, right? How you look at it, but The Shining, that was the whole thing with The Shining. That's like why the black guy was like, "Oh, you have the gift too, don't you? You have The Shining."
And that's they were trying to be racist.
No,
I'm joking. I'm joking completely.
That's actually what it meant. Like, that's why the hotel reacted to it.
Sure.
Basically, I think it's like that's why, like, the hotels, like you're supposed to sacrifice something to it. It's all like that's why, like, I go, it's not really satanic versus just a weird horror thing.
But it might have played into the satanic panic.
Your
mic out a little bit more and not be so nitpicky about it. Even though that's what we do here.
Your Exorcist premiered on pay cable. Some of the other films I mentioned were available before this. In addition, Poltergeist came out in theaters the year before. After people were exposed to all these similar films, we see that satanic panic starts to set in. There were many factors that facilitated this in addition to the movie industry. There were some recent changes to society that people were concerned about as well. They didn't know what was going to happen. These were confusing times. For instance, the divorce rate dramatically increased in the late 1950s. There were more dual-income families. More children were in daycare than ever before. They were referred to as latchkey kids, indicating they would come home to an empty residence after school. In addition, this new group of...
Hello,
Jab.
Hola, Jab.
Oh, gosh. What was that?
It's a robot version of Vincent.
It is.
Oh, am I roboting again?
Yeah. That's difficult to listen to.
Okay, introduce yourself.
Sorry, what?
You said introduce yourself.
Oh, hey, I'm Jab Slant. I do stuff on the internet, fun stuff. I have conversations. I am hopefully doing some content creation soon as next week, actually. Nice. So that'll be neat. Yeah.
Join the community.
Am I still Mr. Roboto?
No. Honestly, I prefer the robot.
Oh, thank you so much, Jab. Maybe someone should give you a jab in your bread basket. Welcome to the crazy world of the Satanic Panic. And I think he's sort of leading with the media message, which is going to be a common theme. This is the light one.
So, what are we covering?
The Satanic Panic.
I meant like specifically in relation to what?
Media and how it sort of relates to society as a whole. So the effect of media and psychology, which this guy isn't getting into, when it's very clear that Michelle Remembers had a very significant impact on the Satanic Panic. I'm wondering if he's going to even, which was, funnily enough, was written by a Canadian psychiatrist. Remind you of anyone?
Yeah. Oh, well,
quite interesting.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, this is a tough topic and interesting to actually discuss, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you said Gray was potentially joining as well?
Possibly. I don't know.
I
don't think so. I think he's been too busy.
Gray has been editing. He has his side projects.
He has been very busy.
He
has been very busy.
He's probably that.
Okay,
Mhm.
let's not dwell on
Yeah.
who is not here. Let's dwell on who's here and
No, let's shit on Gray
make.
for not showing up. What the hell, Gray? Should have
Okay,
been.
yeah,
Ray's probably busy. You
Screw
gotta
you, Jay.
understand.
Gray.
yeah,
Editing is all.
No, you're good.
yes. Let's not.
Actually, probably beneficial.
Probably. He tends to be a devil advocate, and during the Satanic Panic, who knows if that would be a good thing or bad thing.
Yeah,
But,
you definitely want to stay away from the devil, you know? during
Since
the
everyone's
Satanic
here,
Panic.
what is your experience or concept of the Satanic Panic? I've always known that it was a firestorm between media, the religiosity of people like Jehovah Witnesses. I stated had the belief you experience anything from Satan, and there's a possibility if you hear about Satan, he can come into your soul and possess you. But that's Jehovah Witnesses. Not
I
that
guess-
some Christian sects are much better in their sort of weird beliefs.
Wow,
Mhm.
you're condemning all of the Seventh Day Adventists. How dare you?
That's
Yeah,
the
well,
Mormons.
Doesn't the Church of Latter-day Saints also have, if I remember, they all under the Church of Christ banner?
Okay, sorry, I derailed us. Thoughts about the Satanic Panic? Jab's probably before it.
You didn't
but you feel
derail.
the
It's just to
aftermath.
be clarified, they are still Christians. So there's a step.
Mhm.
You don't have to fight for the Mormons, Tiamon. Okay, people will respect them or
I'll
not.
let
respect
Jab go.
them.
Okay. Yeah. Like the video of the title of the video seems to get across is it seemed to be like kind of the OG cancel culture or the back in the day cancel culture. You know, just another type of moral panic that led to sort of overzealous ostracizing of anyone who sort of didn't fit in within the Puritan purview, you know?
And basically,
Except it maybe with a more kind of conservative Christian leaning rather than, you know, the far left, more kind of commie leaning.
the Red Scare is also another moral panic that happened in history.
Oh, man.
Yeah, there seems to be some level of it kind of anywhere throughout all of history.
So I would say it is more the reaction of the you saw the televangelism popping up in the 80s, more or less, because you always had like Wiccans around, even then, that era. And it was like they probably decided to just have that going on, because a lot of the people you'll see, like, usually the Satanic Panics, like the early was Michelle remembers with McMartin Middle School trial that was completely false. And then it had like spread to like, oh, if you play D&D, stuff like that, you know.
Yes,
But all the way to the
games.
90s, dude, I remember the 90s, you'd still see like lingering effects of it, like, oh, magic, it's a Satan game. Like, people like don't remember there was like actually a Christian based card game really early on. It was, I swear, like I used to find like it's funny when you find dead card games that kind of like still lived for a while.
Was the Satanic Panic back in the 80s? I thought it did it
80s,
sort of
90s, early
yeah,
90s.
I remember it extended a bit into the 90s just from what I
a
kind of
little
generally
bit,
know
but
about
then
it.
you forget though it's a little bit different than the Children's Advisory Council.
What is that? Enlighten me. Enlighten us for the stream.
Not sure. And it remembers it. The Parental Advisory Council is like the one that was like a group of concerned parents that would slap a serious ratings on everybody on TV or something at the time.
Yeah, but that was sort of the Mortal Kombat. We went over that in a different stream.
But that
that
Mortal
would be like the
Kombat.
90s, right?
No, that's why I said it's separate. That's just a
Mm.
different like.
It definitely came. There definitely was it at a head, and we got a base life, I guess. Ooh, okay. He's with the GF, so we must forgive him for that. Understand?
You're like Jennifer Lawrence movie. I'm sure it's she's the first woman to
Riveting.
do whatever thing she's doing in that movie.
Look,
Yep.
look. Jennifer Lawrence can act. It's all good. Well, no.
Sometimes she just coasts on her looks. It seems like nowadays. I don't even know.
She was the best Mystique. Did you not know?
Okay, of course you would
Was
go
she
with that.
Oh yeah, she was. I always forget.
All right.
Well, you know the not to get too sidetracked. Well, I should say this because eventually she became such a leading lady that she basically said, "I'll only act or star in a film where there's at least a co-female lead." And
She's coming for your soul, guys. She's trying to seduce you.
so
The
that's if
Sam
you ever
Pants.
wonder why some of her roles went sideways or looked weird, like in the X-Men.
Yeah.
It's like, why do you, well, Mystique was, she had that in her contract.
Mm-hmm.
But,
I mean,
yeah. But jokes
that's
aside, but yeah, like
Sorry.
Satanic Panic was mostly like 80s, like because it had the whole film of it clashed with the televangelism. It's kind of like early, like because where you hear Satanic Panic traditionally is rise in perceived Satanism in a culture, and they thought they saw it everywhere. Like, but a lot like that's why I say Michelle remembers her McMartin middle school trial or preschool trials.
Yep. I wonder if this guy's even gonna bring it up. This seems a little lame. I might end up skipping it if he just keeps on sort of. I mean, it is interesting, but it doesn't seem to have much substance. This video.
Children had increased access to television and movies. There were more shows on TV, and VCRs were now available. There were many other factors as well. The gas crisis was putting financial pressure on a lot of people. There was a recession. Inflation and unemployment were both high. The effects of the Vietnam War were being felt. The counterculture was challenging traditional views of morality. The drug culture was as well. The Charles Manson murders had terrified the nation, and they were thought of as connected to Satan. And people were cynical about the government because of the Watergate scandal. All these factors together led to paranoia.
Watergate was
People
a thing.
started to look for a reason why things were changing.
That's
What
a
could be
weird
doing
thing to shove together.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's just leaving the meat for the rest. I mean, all these factors did probably create a certain environment where the people wanted the moral superiority
The
of
Vietnam
God.
era, right, is something a subject I would love to dive into at some point on how it, or at least the post, it either changed or shattered culture. Because I was watching a history thing on it. They had mutually assured destruction, right? That was like period. That's just like, but it covers up till then. And it's like, sure, but you had a big change. Like the hippies in the 60s, the boomers, maybe the boomers' kids of the World War II veterans people era weren't as moral or super Christian, right? And
Yeah, what's happened to America? We've lost all our values.
because it's like the
Is it death of
70s,
God?
people forget
Nature killed
though.
us
It was
all.
like after that, divorce
yeah.
rates shot.
Oh, he dropped out. Probably better
We
for
lost
us.
him.
Let's just move on, Jeff. He was
Alrighty.
going on. No, I'm joking. That was
You
somewhat
have to provide a
informative.
little bit of
I'm going to add him on
context
after I
for me.
play.
Obviously, I
Sorry.
During the
was
same
born in the
time,
80s.
evangelical
I was
Christian groups were
great,
becoming
so-
politically powerful. For example, Jerry Falwell's Moral
Cat
Majority.
on a keyboard.
These groups suggested an answer to the question, Satan. That answer was being contemplated by many in 1983 and even acted on in some instances. But in May 1985, we see that Satanic Panic was given a boost. The ABC show 2020 aired an episode titled The Devil Worshippers. It featured stories of alleged kidnappings, murder, and other bad activities connected to satanic activity. The episode suggested that cinema was the devil's public relations firm. As Satanic Panic really started to take hold, Stranger Danger was also being publicized. because child abductions and murders were on the rise. People started connecting these two constructs. People started to believe that satanic cult members had infiltrated various levels of the government, police forces, schools, and daycares, with the mission being to promote evil and to contain.
Have something, Jab?
No, I
Doesn't it
was
sound
laughing.
all
It
so
sounds
lovely?
it sounds like, something you might hear an activist say, except replace the language with racism or patriarchy, something along those lines.
Yep. Insert your buzzword. Insert your fear.
Yeah,
Definitely.
History tends to repeat itself, as we see.
I tend to see history goes in a spiral. It has variations,
You
but
stole that from John Green, didn't you?
I mean, history repeats
How did you know?
itself.
Okay.
I watch whatever it's called too.
Oh, you loser! I read John Green. I didn't have to watch his book.
See, history repeats
Watch his book.
itself all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
or
I was
listen to
talk-
his book, audiobook.
That's what you gotta understand, Vincent. History will always repeat itself, one fashion or another.
Yeah, like
Because-
that Tool song, that horrible, horrible song where he.
I mean,
oh God.
because that's the thing is when you're a student of history, it's kind of strange, Jab. So if you never part of my pastime, I was a kid in school that was good with science and history. It was my main.
Yeah.
I knew enough of the other.
I can imagine that. You definitely have
I'll
the
add-
knowledge base
ask
to
you.
sort of be in front of a
Or just
class.
give like
Be
a
like,
rough.
listen here, whippersnappers. This is your history. Know it, and they'll just.
Well,
Maybe
what's funny is
30s.
I grew up on but see, that's why I was familiar with it. That's why I grew up with more shades of gray, even though you have your stuff. So the Satanic Panic, right? It's like
talk about gray.
see, I was even though I was born in 85, right? I grew up on Adam West Batman that had probably because that was on TV. And then I was raised by my grandparents, which I watched what was it? Hawaii 5-0.
So you rest back into the Satanic Panic, and now you're making us suffer for it.
I was raised way of baby by what you never saw Hawaii 5-0?
No, but it has nothing
I
to
watched
do.
a couple episodes. I wasn't super
No,
into
we're
it.
talking the original. It was one of the longest running CBS shows ever.
I think I watched the maybe remake or rerun or something.
Yeah, it was literally that. But that just shows the era I kind of grew up in. But I'm very familiar with this era. At least history. You can't forget.
You lived
it,
long
John.
before it.
I didn't. I
don't believe you. How old are you?
You
Like
experience it. No, you experience it and find it out but later on. Because it was definitely a very more interesting time for TV and culture. Late 80s, and that even you either learned and whatever. It's often how we survived as kids, I guess.
Yeah. And you did talk about latchkey. There's probably a lot of other social unrest that really played a greater factor. Still wonder why he's bearing the lead of what you brought up, the Michelle remembers.
Because you think of it, that was the concept of the Satanic Panic was you had the rise in televangelism, which is resurge of the super far right views or extreme forms.
I don't even necessarily agree with that. They were very, very manipulative, the evangelist movement, the glory gospel, taking advantage of poor, innocent people. It's more about the sort of grifters who went around with those miracle or snake oil salesmen. You think those people had morals in reality? I mean, yes, they did leech off of the religious right, but to say they were religious right is probably inaccurate.
Would you not call the outside? It's like saying what was it? Seventh-day Adventist, right? They're not or you. What is it? Whatever the David Koresh's people were.
Oh, the cult of Kool-Aid drinkers who all died.
They were that's more complicated.
They wanted to
but-
go up into the mothership, the comet, and that was
Nope,
forced.
wrong one. Nope.
It doesn't
David-
matter. All those crazy cults
Ah.
are the same.
That
including
was actually that's a
Scientology.
sect of Christianity. Come on, weird
Well.
little sect of it. That's why I said Church of Christ. Underneath there, you got your Seventh-day Adventists. You know.
Well, everyone wants to hype up the littlest thing. It's even happening nowadays.
Contaminate a generation with immorality. The main targets of these evildoers were children. Ostensibly, they were committing homicide, kidnapping, and other types of maltreatment. This fictitious epidemic was called Satanic Ritual Abuse, or SRA. As these rumors started to gain steam, the media bought into the nonsense and created a feedback loop. There were all these stories about SRA in the news. People would see them and have these intense reactions. So the news would
Any of
put
this sound
more of these
familiar,
stories on
boys?
instead of helping.
Any of this sound familiar? Media
Yep.
causing a feedback loop, stochastic terrorism, spreading lies and rumors for certain narratives you'd like to push.
Exactly. But bringing that up, I think we should just go on to the next video. I mean, this is probably very informative, but this is not the meat we're going for.
No.
Yeah, it's not.
This one is the good
Dismembering
one.
fetuses. These for
It's,
Excited to talk to you.
it's just one.
account of such rituals.
That's just a little bit of the documentary, but in the trailer,
Okay,
From
yeah.
that nightmare.
Let's,
The book
let's start with some of the documentary.
is called Michelle Remembers.
Michelle remembers. We wrote it together.
together.
The first publicized account of such rituals.
They would put me in cages, sacrifice animals, eating feces and orgies and dismembering fetuses. These were things that you experienced. That's right.
Who are these people?
Well, they're a secret organization, a secret society.
When that book came out, I mean, I'll have no clues.
It was a theory that
By the way,
there's a
does no
satanic
one
conspiracy
remember
and
like
our
when the
children were
Church of
kidnapped?
Satan was refounded? It was a meme for a while. Still kind of is.
Satan? The Church of Satan, are you talking about?
The Church
Is
of
it
Satan.
refounded, you said?
Ah, God, who was the person who did that? It was like one of the ones brought it back to like a fold.
Mainstream success.
Of-
Well, they
oh,
get brought up in this, so this.
I had a friend who was a Satanist in high school.
because it was not
weird.
funny. It was one of those little things people remember. Like they were not like it's a church that comes back. A guy who actually like brought it back.
Okay.
And it was like, what is it? 1975. It's one particular
You're
Anton
definitely
Anton LaVey.
you're definitely a historical guy. Jab, you were saying about the friend, a first-hand account of someone interested in Satanism. What's up with that, man?
Yeah, he was. Actually, I don't think he was a Satanist. I think his sister was, but he was like heavily considering Satanism, and like he read the Satanistic Bible. he was kind of oddly sociopath. At least it came off that way. Like he would talk about how he'd go on the dark web and find all these really fucked up videos that he'd
maybe
watch
just
and laugh
trying to
at.
be edgy, but yeah, possibly.
Maybe he believed some weird stuff. He said some kind of strange things. I kind of stopped hanging out with him a little bit after that.
Yep, they're gonna bring up the Church of Satan, and this video, I have some concerns with it, how it's being presented. So I might actually end up going through this video at some point.
You weren't familiar with the rise of Aleister Crowley, who was a background influence forever?
I have no clue what you're saying, but let's try to
it's
stay on the
fun.
topic.
No,
Hold on.
Aleister Crowley was a guy that, of course, mysticism was back on the rise, and Church of Satan had been recently started popping back up around 1975. Anton LaVey. Yeah. So the idea, it's like, well, maybe it was a tax write-off, but
Yeah, like Scientology. That's even more ridiculous than Satanism, I think. But they're going to bring up the Church of Satanism and probably stand for them too hard. Sorry to ruin anyone who's watching this.
Stolen and sacrificed.
It's known as
I'm
the
gonna
Satanic
pivot one
Panic
more
in the
time.
1980s and 90s.
Sean and Steve.
Vincent,
Whew.
I don't have a wrench in your chat, sir. All right, that's
Okay.
right?
Sheesh. You want to be wrenched? I'll knock
No
a
wonder
wrench
people say you
across
have
your
no
head.
integrity, sir.
Ugh.
Someone must be special.
That's a whole. That's a whole thing.
I'll figure it out later.
how's
Okay, I don't do wrench wars. I'll give it to you eventually. Right now, in the midst, the heart is stopping me from giving you the wrench.
That's just a little bit of the documentary, but in the trailer, it mentioned a book called Michelle Remembers. Can you tell us about that book, Michelle Remembers, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Victoria, so Michelle Remembers is by two authors from Victoria. It is set in Victoria. For me, I mean, my family moved there right after the book was published, while the Satanic Panic was unfolding, and they were everywhere. Michelle and Larry, they were on TV, they were on the radio, they were in the newspapers. It was this.
They were in the funny books, getting beaten by Calvin and Hobbes for their obscene belief. But at least they jump right into Michelle Remembers, because I think that's a very significant part of it. I mean, yes, you can have televangelists talking about people in fiction. That's not really good. Even if the social comment, this is probably really what tipped it over the edge, made people true believers. And if you this sort of, we're going to be getting into this because, yeah, it's good enough to start with.
Story that everyone knew about in Victoria, and like layer upon layer upon layer of this too, right? Like stores downtown had satanic altars in the back, and you had to look out for these people in black, and don't go to the cemetery at night. And
what was it like to grow up in that environment as a kid?
Scary, right? And this, I mean, for me too, the thing about this is like, you know, it's how many 40 years later, so it's like you forget about all of this stuff until this came back into our life. And I had no idea as a kid. Like you're like, oh yeah, they're connected to the Satanic Panic, but I had no idea that this story touched millions and millions of people around the world.
Sean, could you just tell us a little bit about who Michelle Smith and Lawrence Pastor were?
Michelle Smith was a
it is kind of sad the sort of effect it has on posterity, you know? Like you can cause a lot of trauma, and especially your children, if you push that sort of moral panic onto them.
Yeah. Like
and
even the nuclear panic.
Yeah, like to an extent, obviously parents are always going to be cautious of what their kids are doing, what they're consuming, you know, sort of projecting their own values, hoping
fears
to instill them into their children. But yeah, at the same time, their own fears, and a lot of people's fears turn out to be pretty irrational. And it can have bad intergenerational effect.
Yeah, knock-on effect later on. There is typically children either follow the leader, like become molded, or they outright reject their parents completely. That's the two dynamics I tend to see. They either become like molded into their parent, or they become a rebellious figure against them generally.
Yeah, you know, anything what's the thing? Any force has an equal or opposite reaction, right?
Yeah. Any given force has an equal, like the butterfly wings can cause a tornado on the other side of the world. Plenty of adages that all goes along that line.
Yeah.
And
so either your kids can, you know, sort of listen to you and only reinforce the moral panic, or they can rebel against you and sort of create moral panic of their own, or push too hard in the other direction, which is what often happens with especially youthful rebellion.
Yep. Youthful rebellion is just a phase, like the terrible twos or acne. Let's hope it goes away, but sometimes it just traumatizes and leads people down a dark path that they can't really come back from. And
a young woman in Victoria in the 70s who started seeing her psychiatrist, Dr. Lawrence Pastor, who everyone refers to as Larry, when she had a bad dream after a miscarriage. And this is sort of like the genesis for this book. They go into therapy, and it goes from like, you know, once a week to every day for 8 hours at a time. And then as they start going deeper and deeper into therapy, more and more memories are being recovered from Michelle about this terrible abuse she suffered at the hands of a satanic cult when she was 5 years old in Victoria, BC.
And Larry actually recorded those sessions.
He recorded them. There's actually video as well. which apparently
sort
was
of
burnt.
collective gaslighting that you get into when doing something like
Yes.
that. You
It's
know,
also a strange quirk of the human mind to their memories fades, and sometimes some
yeah,
come
especially
back.
like what did he say? What age did he say he was or she was? Like 5 or 6?
Yeah, her memories of the past. It's really
Yeah,
just like trying to
it's like
recover that time period.
yeah, it's like you're so desperate to prove a moral panic narrative that start like you start reaching into children's memories to pull like children are you know what?
Are
Be
easily
fair though,
spared.
they're very reliable narrators. All right, they have
Oh
great
yes,
memories.
children.
Yeah,
So they should have a say in how they're raised also. But
definitely. Yeah.
some of the stuff with the memory recovery therapy just makes me wonder sometimes. What actually led me into this was one of my crackpot theories
Yeah,
that
it makes a lot of sense to hang your hat on the anecdote of a child.
yeah, I mean I thought about this back during the Christine Blasey Ford versus Supreme Justice nominee at the time, Kavanaugh, and her bringing that up. And when the first time it was mentioned was in like a couple therapy with her husband, and it's very reminiscent of this psychological. I'm not going to say that that psychologist did anything. I might be a little bit prone to theorizing with certain things, but therapy that goes back into the past. Like my mother was part of a group called ARE, basically a Christian group led by a prophet, Edgar Casey, who sort of did recovered people's past lives somehow, probably through similar means to this recovery method, taking those fragments from earlier childhood and trying to coax it out of them. I'm not even sure if it's on purpose or not, is how they sort of try to. This probably was on purpose to try to make sense of, try to capitalize on this sort of atmosphere of fear and godliness.
Well, I would say if you're inducing memory, like children are easily sometimes like they're not they're still clayish, so you could still mold them how you want to.
Yeah,
Because
but
that's why
this is about someone taking childhood memories and sort of
see.
making the adult believe
you
that something had from the fragments of their
yeah,
childhood
you
memory.
see more of that in the McMartin preschool trials where they took some memories and it turned out that one of the main kids was just highly schizophrenic and delusional. So
Yeah, I mean, you can find this all over the place. Like, sheesh, Lance, the sort of Canadian stuff with tribal stuff, the stories about those people coming forward about all the atrocities from their past. I don't want to discount their personal belief, but there is a certain amount of skepticism I had towards all those stories that started all that sort of violence against the church.
Yeah, or it's sort of in line with the self-hating white liberals who somehow convince themselves that they're racist, right?
Yeah, they get gaslit into believing that somehow systemically they sort of deserve it. Like,
Yeah, there's no way
that's
for them
almost
to escape the
religious. That's like
racism because of
original
their
sin.
oh,
White
how
people
dare
are
you,
born
how
with some
dare
original
you
skin.
how dare
Original
you
skin.
make fun of the white guilt
original
concept.
skin.
Not skin. Original skin.
That was a really good. That was a really good one.
The white guilt concept, how dare you? That is a whole philosophy and a grift unto itself. They need to pay for everything that you did prior and you can never atone. I mean, that's like that's like their own like moral conniption. And but then you also have like the white savior complex, which is like, yeah, that's its own different like we're educated, we know better. But like when it comes to Michelle Remembers and like the McMartin school trials, that's like, oh, some kids started doing that. And I mean, you're familiar with the South Park episode where all of the what is it? All the kids accused the town.
I remember the finger bang thing. They became a religious. They became a Christian boy band, and they had Cartman had that finger bang song.
Oh no,
That's what I remember from South Park.
You don't remember the one where they accused all their parents of being?
Oh yes, and they gave them all herpes. That's probably it. Close enough, though.
Yeah.
But we got one of the tapes anonymously. One of the therapy tapes that no one has ever heard is in the film.
That was video?
He recorded everything. Wow. He was like
he wanted to be famous, didn't he?
100%.
Didn't you learn anything from Nixon? Like, don't leave it. Don't like tell on yourself like that, man.
He wanted to be famous though. Like he wanted to be known.
Yeah, I guess so.
Steve, fun fact, by the way, you can find these tapes. It's not covered, but it's very hard to find anything on this.
Yeah, I'm sure it's horrifying. And go through the details of how he sort of brought out these memories of her. Probably put her in some sort of hypnotic state. And like Aladdin, the bad guy in that, Jafar, whatever his name was. But yeah, that guy hypnotizing the vizier into giving his daughter. That's very telling. I wonder if oh god, sorry. He was also queer coded, so that's sort of scary also. I've heard people go off on that.
How do you draw that?
No clue about that. Okay, lost job. Probably bored him to death or scared him away. But, you know, Christ compels him to come back, or who knows. But let's gaily move forward.
Satanic Panic. It was in the 80s and 90s. What exactly happened? What was it about?
It was a lot of just like wild accusations of people who were basically like taking children and sacrificing them. That was like the main thorough thread of what the Satanic Panic was. Many people were definitely accused of it. It happened through daycare centers. Anywhere where people really had like contact with children is where you seem to see a lot of these cases begin to erupt.
Like a lot of the people, I have to just say this too, right? Like if you were at all different in the 80s, this is something that you could have been accused of. Like, so we're both queer men. So many of the people who went on trial in a lot of these daycare cases were queer, right? Or a single woman in her 20s who wasn't married. You know, like these people who
you can start seeing where they're going with this. And he's probably right. Probably, I'm pretty sure I've seen this sort of investigated in different media of nowadays, like the horror show, American Horror Story. I think they sort of played with this sort of idea, sending that lesbian woman to the mental institution and all that fun stuff.
Well, I mean, you have like that weird, like the guy brought up the Amityville Horror, right?
Yeah.
Because that's an actual case that's where he didn't get off on that. He tried to say, "Oh, I was compelled by a devil inside the house that was like there was either some sort of devil was manifesting in the house and manifested into him, and basically."
Yeah, a lot of mental illnesses probably sort of increase the sort of belief, the sort of feudal belief in the demonic possession of people.
But then, you know, there's that, I will say, interesting in this, even though there is a concept, right, of if people are quote unquote spiritual to a degree or sensitive, they can sense spirits and stuff or know it.
Dr. Who covered that in one episode, so
like but there's this concept of like in Amityville Horror's case, the kid got possessed and then it took over the body. He he woke up and said, "Oh crap! I murdered the family." Oh well, good luck having anyone believe that if it actually happened.
Yeah, split personalities, although DID or multiple personality disorder or schizophrenia. There's all sorts of fun stuff to go all along with this.
And that happened with the McMartin trials because one of the kids couldn't or miscounted events. It's like, oh,
yeah, you said the schizophrenia of one child sort of caused this sort of thing. And yeah, but you see the direction they're already starting to go. And I do agree that there's probably a measure of that was in consideration. And but it is sort of interesting how they took up this documentary and making their identity a part of it. Very interesting.
We're not just part of the mainstream culture
Mhm.
and that sort of like normal, let's just say American family life. Like you could have faced this accusation. How do you defend yourself?
Yeah. And
Right?
Steve, when Colin asked you that question, you kind of laughed. And I think you laughed because it's when we hear satanic panic now in the framework of like 2023, it's kind of like, that's ridiculous.
Mhm.
But when we watch the documentary, and like you mentioned, people's lives were impacted to the point where people ended up in jail, losing their jobs, losing their livelihood. So looking at it from like a 2023 viewpoint, how did people not know that this was kind of like we needed to ask more questions?
I think the questions were being asked. I think you had media that was perpetuating what was like thought to be happening. Valerie Pringle, who is like one of like
Yeah, sort of like the media sort of just projects what the latching on certain concepts. I'm not going to get into it right now. They're going to get into it. And the media is a powerful tool. You want to sort of enemy of the people. And since America, well, this was in Canada even, so that's even more weird that they did that. And from a Canadian psychiatrist. And this was back in the 70s and 80s, so oof. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how this can go.
Canada's like
Very serious journalist,
right?
yeah.
She's on air asking Michelle if she was eating feces. Like it was very, and like it was like the noon newscast. Like it was very, like it was all over the place, and it just, I don't know. Like you had law enforcement who were participating. You just had all these authority figures within our society that were saying this is happening, this is true, and so everybody just, how can you deny that, right?
Yeah, they were I think police officers who were specifically like that was their beat in a way. Like they were occult specialists, which it just sounds kind of wild to think about it now, but that's what they were actually assigned to do, right? It's like an X-Files episode. Like,
Cops for Christ.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cops for Christ. Can you talk about what their families were going through while they were on tour with this book?
You know, I mean, this is like for us, you know, there's several ways to approach a talk, right?
Mhm.
So like we started with the book, that's sort of where you start, and then you expand out from that to sort of talk to all the other people who are around that.
Mhm.
When we started reaching out to the family and also doing our research and realizing that, you know, we can't find any interviews with a single family member who at that time came out and said, no, this is my version of this and it's not correct at all. So for us, it's.
Do you find this sort of backwards also a little bit weird that they're sort of going back for interviews of these people and they could cause a knock-on effect overall moving forward with this?
I mean,
because obviously these people are going to have distorted perceptions of their time dealing with this sort of satanic panic, and it's going to create sort of an anti-satanic panic, in my personal opinion, especially people who would have a
it's kind
theory
of
that the witch
strange. Recollection is a strange thing. Does it change or very different over time? Possibly, yes. Because what sometimes people remember, either memories become stronger or weaker over time. Sometimes they can have odd perceptions of if they're recalled later. Like, but
yeah, they can have a sort of knock-on effect. The negative impressions will stand out much more clearly than the positive impressions in anyone's life. They're always going to remember the negative times over the good times.
I mean, it's kind of a proven theory. Kids. Now, it's very rare if you remember.
It's proven that hate clicks get more traffic than positive clicks, and adults even. So
As you're
yeah,
supposed to grow old, as you grow older, there is the people who don't remember their childhood or like past a certain age. If you've ever heard that before in
yeah,
psychology.
absolutely. There's a lot of people who can't remember their childhood at all. Maybe they have bad memories in their old age. I can remember.
Or it gets lost and they can't recall it as like, oh, what you're like at 4 or 5. Can you recall the something? You know, like you don't remember your time as a baby, or it's like 3 or 4.
Yeah, I think it's called infantile amnesia. It's almost universally applied unless someone has some sort of weird memory kink, like not photographic memory, eidetic memory. I think it's considered. For all intensive purposes, it's photographic memory. But yeah, most people have a distorted view of the past, which will shape their present.
It's like reaching out to Larry's first wife, ex-wife, his daughter, Michelle's sister, Michelle's best friend. This was a like new territory, brand new territory for a doc, which is so exciting. And also like it was so important for us knowing how big this book was and how far it spread and how much media it gained for 15 years, 20 years, and people still talk about it today, to have these family members and get that story and create a platform for them to actually be like, this is the truth.
Well, Blanche Barton said,
see, this is where I start diverging. I don't think I haven't watched it, but for them to say it's the truth, generally there's probably more truth to what they pulled than what was accounted and pulled out. But
I would say there's more probably truths and something akin to the Dateline specials of the 90s, which if they still survive, because that's the reason why you have more of a recollection of the McMartin trials,
because
because
more fresh in your mind. These guys are going back 20 years, well, beyond 20 years, but 20 years after all this
recounting personal testimony that wasn't like documented like that. That's why even as campy as the old like shows were that talk about the murder trials back then, like the ones I was sending you as you wanted to research this video, right? For the prepping. Yep. Like that type of stuff still lingers, so you still see it. And if you wanted to research and ask those people, you could ask the people now, but you still have that era of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and that meat and bones for this to sort of stew with.
So it's not relying on purely first-hand accounts that someone might remember or misremember.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty in this, and they're talking with, I hate that term truth. Or you can say we're recovering untold stories. Why were these stories untold in the first place? The reason I'm not actually going into all the research is because I'm hoping to do a couple of streams slowly uncovering for everyone to see along what is going on. Maybe it's a flawed logic. Maybe I should be the expert on this and know everything and be like, yeah, these guys are full of shit. But no, I want everyone watching along either now or in the future to sort of take a look at this and see what you think, see what our commentary really shows about this.
True.
Says it right in the doc when she's talking about the talk shows and the people that come on, and it's all the people who are victims, and she just says like, why didn't they bring out the family members? Why didn't the family members ever come on stage and actually say like hold them to account?
Because it would make for bad TV. However, it makes for a great documentary. So.
And were they excited to finally talk to someone about this?
Oh yeah, I mean when we it's a little nervous too doing this, knowing that there is a lot of trauma to this film as well, right? For them, for the other victims of the Satanic Panic, it's like you laugh because it's Satanic Panic, but there's also a real serious side to this. And when we called,
my question is, why wouldn't they came forward with the police files and all this? Is any of this documented? I would assume so, considering the people that they're interviewing. So it will be an interesting thing to go back after watching this and seeing how well because I am going to watch this documentary and sort of compare it to the reality of the situation here.
Trying to find it's odd, and it was only came out recently.
Yeah, it really is. I think we're going to be going into.
I tried finding it, like, trust, like, Google, Bing, all the sources. I think I only found one place it was like airing, and then what's weirder is when you search YouTube, right? I found all the, I found all the videos on the McMartin stuff you could use, but I couldn't find anything on Michelle Remembers on YouTube, and it's vast. Like people reacting to the book like 20 years later, but no, it's like I'm like, surely there was a Dateline special years ago on this, or some report PBS thing into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's weird that they're sort of breaking this, and the other gentleman didn't even bring it up. He might have brought it up later. And also the fact I'm looking at
criticizing
the
these
Wikipedia, it
filmmakers.
starts.
I'm not criticizing these filmmakers. If it's that,
I will probably.
But you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
Like when you search a topic, generically, you'll find an old A&E special. You'll find something on History Channel, or you'll find something on PBS from years ago. There's always usually a source, but for Michelle Remembers, I don't understand. Either it fell off and it didn't make its way to YouTube, like the McMartin stuff did, or it's just buried. It's like, oh, fresh. It's like, well,
yeah, or
it's hard to research properly.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely for future streams to go and investigate with this sort of thing. Why there's not much document. Everything says it was discredited. Have to see when it was discredited and who discredited it. Because what you're saying doesn't make a lot of sense. They're breaking this almost over 30 years later. And seems a bit odd, maybe even a bit convenient, but I'm going to do research afterwards. I want everyone to take this all in with us.
Indeed. Larry's ex-wife, Mary Lynn, for the first time. I mean, that was nerve-wracking. And the funny thing is, like, just said, "Hey, listen, we want to do a film, and we want to talk to you." Hour long. It was like 40 years hadn't passed at all. She had all the stories and was just really wanted to talk to us.
Mm-hmm. Well, how did you approach that? Because you mentioned that people hadn't spoken to them. So, Steve, like when you call them up, what do you say to them to get them to trust you? You mentioned it's very traumatic. How do you get them to open up and trust the process that you're trying to do?
I think with a lot of the people that actually participated in the doc, we contacted, of course, like other people that were close family members. And it's just kind of, you're testing the waters, right? You're seeing who wants to talk, who feels like they have something to say. And like with Marilyn, she's helped like multiple investigators. She's kept binders full of just everything, like newspaper articles, anything to do with her divorce.
She recorded one of the bishops, I think.
She recorded everything.
Yeah.
She was like,
she was savvy.
She was really good.
Like spy through.
And yet you're saying a lot of this stuff is really hard to find out there.
You're telling me that like something as iconic as this, no one has anything. And I'm not going to blame her for still having all this stuff, because I'm the type that I would keep newspapers or something from a period of time or a section of that for an event so you could recall it, right?
Yes. But it's also possible keeping all these things could distort your memory. I'm not saying it is. It's just a very good possibility. Keeping clippings and not really write. We would have to see what she has. Did she write down her own experiences, or she let in the sort of social climate affect how she sees it? This is quite an interesting.
Like, do you have like it's not like saying, oh, it's something where I know where this is all the time. It's like, it's not always the case, right?
Yeah, I meant it depends on the evidence that she has to sort of put forward.
Because there's like historical documentaries on, like, I'm sure you're not familiar with the film, like The Good Shepherd. who it's based upon? Who's in the CIA?
Just assume I don't know and the audience doesn't know.
Well,
And move
it's like the idea of kids find collages or someone they kept of the parents, and it's like, oh, mom and dad or mom was into this stuff, and you're like, oh, and they don't tell you as later on, right? That's
Yeah, I
usually
think-
how people find this stuff. It's like,
I think there's actually a Black Mirror. I haven't watched in a while, but supposedly it's very similar to this. Someone goes back to their hometown to discover sort of about these serial killings in their hometown, and they end up finding out someone there, like their mom, had some connection to these serial killers. It would definitely be a good sort of a thing to go over in
because it's kind
comparison
of
to
like
this.
the guy that has say it's based on the Good Shepherd or the Man Nobody Knew was because the guy was it's based on the recollections of the guy's family who invented counterintelligence at the CIA, who could not talk about his work at home. And they're like, I think people asked him and go,
So
"Oh,
how did that relate to this in particular?
I said this is like the kids learned about it later on what their father did."
Yes. And this is, I can see how it's sort of relevant and sort of not.
Because it's not like, oh, they knew their dad worked for the CIA. No, because he didn't
Okay.
talk about his work. And it's sometimes weird how in these old cases, oh, I have this as fresh as day. I remember this, a journal. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay.
generally that's not reliable. Typically, other factors will play into it. So I don't really like the language they're using.
That's why
They're sort
that's
of
why I used that
kidding.
example.
Okay. You were trying to pretty much say that you press F to doubt on if they remember all this stuff very correctly.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I think there should be a certain amount of skepticism that should go along with this sort of documentary making. I really need to watch this documentary and compare it to basically why.
especially if it's an old crisis that like that's all the people were known for, and they have the collage or something ready for you.
Yeah, they might want to have their 15 minutes of fame if they really haven't gotten it. And why this documentary apparently is rather hard to find. It's on Tubi. I'm sure I can get a hold of it and see what it's really about. Normally, I wouldn't do this for a piece of media, but
No.
But this is a documentary where you want to know the facts going into certain things. Now, some documentaries you don't need all the facts for. It's sort of about certain people and their experiences, but this is more about a fact-based journey. So you want to sort of why viewing it, you want to know the facts going in here.
That's why I found it weird that when I was trying to research this or help you with this, you want to talk about this. Like, I can't find it. Kind of bothers me. I can't find anything on this. Like, no one's done anything over this in 20 plus years.
Yeah, and considering this video, I'm surprised no one's actually looking at this. We're gonna get to it. I
Like
mean, all these preamble of what we have is just questioning.
It's like
basically, why is people not talking about this? Why are people making these weird claims, which they're going to be getting into pretty soon?
You'll still have to see this, but this is a concept. When I want to talk about something like this, I'll do a level of research to find out both sides or find out the origins of it. And it's weird that you can find the entry on Wikipedia. You could scour stuff, some people who have talked about it, but you could not find anybody who's done the deep dive into Michelle Remembers. And I'm like, okay.
That's insane. That seems a little bit weird, a little bit sus. Maybe it's a conspiracy.
But then again, right, I'm also thinking too, because it got discredited, it didn't make it to the YouTube era or anybody covering it. Like, reason why a lot of Dateline investigations survive is because it was like the McMartin trials. that destroy lives, and that gets remembered.
Huh.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. It is a weird sort of puzzle. Maybe they're capitalizing off of it. There's a lot of mystery here, but also not a lot why
It's not a
these
lot of.
guys are sort of doing this.
It's not a
interview.
lot of meat. There's not a lot of meat to like grab onto. But
Yeah.
Thriller
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Yeah. And so really it was just like the path of least resistance for us. And who felt like they wanted to stand up on the stage and do it. And that's kind of like the path that we took.
Also helped that I was from Victoria for a lot of, because I mean, a lot of the story is set there, and especially for the family, it's a shared experience that at least I have some understanding, you know, not at all to the level that they went through, but at least what the city is like and what actually happened there.
Were you kind of surprised that this started in Victoria, in Canada? I mean, this went on to become very influential, especially in the United States.
They even met the Pope.
Well, yeah, and they met the Pope, exactly. I
Yeah.
mean,
This all started in Victoria, BC.
Yes, I was surprised.
Victoria's so snoozy.
It's not that kind of city, you guys. It's not that kind of city. So
I guess because I don't really think, I don't know, I guess we don't associate Canadians with ever having that kind of like influence on the global stage like that, except for maybe hockey. But
you know, I mean, one of the claims in Michelle Remembers, of course, is that Victoria was one of the satanic capitals of the world, right? Victoria and
yes.
Geneva, Switzerland. And that was for a time in the 80s. That's what some people thought. So
And so doesn't that kind of make it so, you know, like people are like, Victoria's the capital of Satanism? And it's like, it just makes it like that much more believable because it's just not believable at all. Like, you know, it felt like that.
Well, I think it would be believable if you believe there's a satanic cult that it would start be in places that not a lot of eyes were on. I mean, that makes complete sense. I mean, I've never been to this place, Victoria, British Columbia, but if it's a small, sleepy town, ripe for mysteries and conspiracies among at least
people
the youth.
can correct me if I'm wrong, but see, like Canada has like this weird thing like the US has in like all their provinces. Like more people probably live in like cities like New York or LA and stuff like that, or the big cities like Chicago or Detroit, right? Like most people in Canada like live in like mostly one or two provinces, and then you have like the outlying provinces which aren't exactly known for anything except a minor trade or their backwater towns. So
yeah, and there's some places that really take advantage of sort of local mysteries, local crimes to sort of
local
get tourism.
history.
I would really like to do a comparison with just that Black Mirror episode. I'm going to actually have to
Because
watch it.
what's interesting is, as vast as Canada actually is, they live in one or two provinces mainly, and the rest of Canada is like just wilderness and resources. Like,
yeah, there's not much in Canada. But again, I brought
It's
up
like
the
Alaska.
thing with
It's
Lauren Southern with the sort of supposedly aboriginal grave sites. Definitely, this seems to be playing off of the past is unknown and mysterious. So all these grave sites, so very ripe for.
By the way, how dare you not you discredit the stories of the Catholics murdered the Indian children?
Oh yes, I'm not discrediting it. I'm not pushing back. I'm just saying that's sort of ripe. That's ripe material for theories and conspiracy theories to run afloat. And
do you remember that story when it came out?
Yeah, of course. Adam and Stitch had I think they had Lauren Southern and counterpoints on versus Lance and the famous Tale of Two Rabbits or something like
They
that.
were basically force converting the kids.
Yeah, there was a lot of speculation and not very much fact, but it also comes back.
Oh, but it also resulted in a big shit show in Canada on the because when they investigated some of the stuff, it led a very bad stain on the church and whatever was
yeah, before
area.
it was even really confirmed or proven, just the sort of speculation had people rioting and vandalizing churches and all sorts of stuff just off of rumors and speculation and not even hard facts. And Lauren as much as you want to think of her for a lot of her stupidity in the past, when she came back, she seemed a lot more stable. She's probably a little less stable now, but ups and downs, women and all. I don't want to be sexist, but people have certain lives, and she got into drama. Oh, let me not even get into that. Let me move on so I can get off of that particular point, at least.
That kind of had a play happening.
I appreciated the fact that you let the viewer kind of make up their mind on what's happening. Who would you say whose fault it was ultimately this happened?
That's tricky.
Satan, obviously.
Right?
I mean, those are the traits of the devil, right? I mean, greed, influence, power.
I think that there was so many different
Big
like
in the
social
question.
changes that were happening at the time. Like religion was much more popular. It was much more through the culture, and they had a book that just dropped at the right time, and it kind of just it clicked. And so trying to place blame on people, I find it really tricky because
It's also hard though, because it's almost like everyone's responsible. I mean, it's like the two authors, plus the institutions, plus the church, plus the media for participating, plus people who didn't speak up and say, for me in our film, one of the takeaways is that moment when the Wiccan police detective Charles Ennis finally says, like we basically all have a responsibility to stand up and say this is a lie, and even if it, you can't just say it once, you have to say it over and over and over again until everyone realizes it is a lie.
I don't know about that. That's sort of just repeating yourself over and over again. This is how it got started.
I have it's kind of like, how did Billy Graham become so popular? Like, Billy Graham was take into account, he was known as for all the good he did, and at least in his life, he was known for just doing tent side revivals, right? And you don't take him at credit or where it is, how he built his reputation. He wrote religious books back in this time period too. But then again, journalism was like slightly different. It wasn't like a form of wildfire as it is now. You would agree. You had to have a journalist cover a book or something. And, all the work, Billy Graham did. But it's like, but his books were there. So, or somebody pick up the book and goes, I want to interview that author. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the name, but not familiar with his.
You had to do the legwork
background.
if you ever wanted to look up somebody. Like, there was a big deal of.
Yeah, you had to go to libraries, particular
you
libraries.
Had to go like
were limited.
If a book was ever wanted to become big, you had to send it to the editor for them to review.
Yeah,
pray to God they review it.
Information goes self-publishing. Horrible clickbait websites like Gawker. I revisited one of my old videos about Nobody Speaks versus the Red Pill, and that really was something where I'm like, the Nobody Speaks seems extremely biased, and freaking little Gawkers, when they did a lot of things that could be considered very unethical. I'm not going to condemn them for it, and I really don't know how I would go about doing that. But
it's
people taking documentaries as truth or even getting close. Sometimes they're more of a narrative that uses truth as a framework, in my opinion. And sometimes they're more unbiased. And these two interviewees are trying to make it like they let the viewer just decide on this particular matter. But I'm thinking they're probably a bit biased on this, but I need to do some research after this.
I don't know.
This is all exploratory investigation into this, sort of to take both myself, you, and anyone else who wants to join us along on this little ride. Probably going to make it a multi-series and ride it all the way up.
Pretty much.
But nobody realizes it.
I'm hopeful.
I'm hopeful.
Do any of the people though who are kind of like promoting this idea of Satan, like satanic ritual abuse, like the journalists at the time, like the media figures, like Maury Povich was around, was popular at this time. Geraldo, Oprah. I don't know. Do any of them ever come out and said, yeah, we messed up here. This was not like credible at all, and we should have done a better job.
Geraldo did give an apology. So I mean, you'll see in the film he did one very notorious show that influenced, according to the
It's like a
sociologist.
three-parter, right?
Yeah, that the sociologist that we spoke to said, this spread this to, from just being sort of.
The sociologist. Very interesting little datum. I'm wondering if that's
I kind of
gonna come up.
remember Geraldo back in the day. I'm surprised I didn't mention Sally Jesse Raphael.
Well, maybe she didn't take up on this. Geraldo, Marvin.
If we ever want to date ourselves, do you remember how Oprah started out?
She was an actress from what I remember.
Like when she started her talk show before she switched the format to being more black centric later on in her career.
You can say she's black centric. I think, yeah, she sort of started off in that role.
She started off as like the
'80s,
early '90s as the generic covering stuff.
Yeah, she started off really low. I remember her being in Roots.
Kind of like very what you would call like.
She was just all over the place, and yeah, she started off standard and all these sort of sensitization, all these like what Jerry Springer was the very tippy top of, almost a parody over the top of all these shows. And yeah, but I wouldn't say she went black centric, but she definitely went a little bit that way. I think
yeah, like
he was black enough to be accepted by the black community, and yet still.
But Geraldo prior to that show was also a journalist. So, it wasn't up until recently he left doing journalism,
Yeah, yeah. And we have nowadays good examples of former journalists like.
He left Fox News earlier this year, right? People would say, well, yeah, but he's been doing journalism for so long, and the man's like getting up there. Maybe he wants to damn retire.
What type of journalism? Tucker Carlson supposedly is doing stuff on Twitter. One of my favorite, even though I don't take his word as Lord.
Okay, there's a difference between.
He started off as now he's an internet personality because.
No, there's a difference in a journalist and an editorial coverer. That's where Tucker Carlson got his start. Like
Rachel Maddow, yeah, he did Crossfire. He had the famous confrontation with Jon Stewart.
Yeah, and like you have people who were like over Fox and news networks that were actual reporters for the longest time. Now most of them are just editorial opinion piece writers who got promoted. But like there was actual journalists. That's why like O'Reilly and other people that may not agree with them, but they fully investigate stuff. And
well, you could say Veritas does the same, but I sort of dislike what's the guy who runs Veritas who got kicked out like a year or two ago from Veritas, Project Veritas. There was some weird stuff with that. So yeah, that you can say they investigate, but their sort of framework and how they edit it can still be deceptive.
They would go in. Project Veritas started off as various like pretty pure investigations. So.
It started off pretty lame, I think. Oh god.
Well, yeah, the
main character went as a pimp and did some stuff. Seeing that was just sort of funny. It almost
I don't know how like they didn't get caught or something.
Well, how did the James Lindsay wrote Helen Rose something and Peter Boghossian get away with writing those papers? I think life is just more ridiculous now, and people are more willing to believe more ridiculous things overall.
But like it goes back to saying like Geraldo probably covered it. Like Maury Povich was still doing sensational like TV stuff all the way till the show died. It's like Oh, this week. we're
Yeah,
gonna
the
do
80s was
this.
big on this. Probably another thing that spread this around is the media of the 80s probably really hyped this up to the extreme.
Oh God.
I mean, 70s, I don't even know about that
That's the
era.
scary part about looking at stuff from the 80s. Even though I kind of grew up on that television and like it's like that heavy like news anchor kind of feel, right?
Yeah, they came off more professional. They start to sort
It's
of
like,
dumb
oh,
down in recent
tonight
years.
at 8
Yeah,
in a dramatic voice.
yeah.
There was a
Find out
creepy
what's in your water
shadow.
what in your refrigerator can kill you tonight at 11. It's like, what the hell?
It literally, that's what 80s, like early 90s broadcasting was like. And if you ever go back and watch the old 80s films, you're like, this seems way over the top than it you did now.
Just like the hairstyles and the clothes, but different environment. We
That's
didn't
why
have
those
everything.
cartoons.
I
It's
think
very much a cartoon. That's why a lot of that stuff I don't think has aged well.
okay, yeah. Well, you can see some of the old cinematic styles, their speech patterns get mocked nowadays because they had a certain rhythm that they thought was effective or something. I don't even know. I think it came out of the silent era. But let's not get too diverted.
No, they
on
make
that.
my point is they make everything sensational, and it's like, oh, this, and this, and you're like,
Yeah, but after some time, that's going to wear off. You need to find new tactics for sensationalizing certain
it's like,
things.
why does everyone remember the Dateline specials years ago? They're always melodramatic and like mix it with the overtones.
Yeah, I would say it's much more subtler back in the day, but there definitely was a sense of edge to that. But it was done in such a way that it was sort of weird to go about it. Okay. I love going off on a tangent.
You're scratch.
I'm trying to keep us up
A
here.
rumor into 12 million households or 40 million households in the US suddenly were like, oh my God, there's Satanists everywhere. Like he played a big role in that, but he did apologize in the 90s, which is something.
I mean, because people were really hurt by this. You mentioned daycare. There was a woman by the name of Margaret Kelly Michaels. What happened to her?
She was working in a school with young children, and a parent had accused her, right? And it went on to be a super long trial. She went to prison for 5 years. She was accused of heinous stuff, and like basically she was tarred and feathered. She's had to carry that around with her for the rest of her life, and her life has kind of been ruined by it. Like it's these types of accusations, like when people are calling other people or accusing them of being pedophiles, it really it ruins your reputation and it can ruin your life. And Kelly Michaels definitely has felt that.
We should say, I mean, these cases are still being brought to justice, these false accusations. The film premiered at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, and there's a case literally right now that is unfolding for a man who has been, this is like 30 or 40 years of his life, and they're saying, no, this is not true now, right? Like, it's not just something from the distant past.
Like, when was this discredited, and why are these things still going forward? I really need to fact check this.
Oh, it was based upon the Devil Worship Exposing Satan's Underground. October 22nd, 1988 was Geraldo's investigation. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, why is this?
That's how did anyone remember that? That's like a old episode. Like one episode.
I mean, they definitely did their research to know about this, but
yeah, that's like one of the things.
They're assuming everyone here is true, and I really want to dig into these claims.
And I'm sure Geraldo dug into everybody for that, and the fact of he didn't take everyone word for word, and it's one episode. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you get some things wrong, sometimes you get pushed the wrong direction, but I'm wondering how some of these cases. This will definitely be an interesting thing to go through. So anyone who's watching this in the future want to look into this and talk to me? Most people who will be here will be able to contact me. I'm not that big of a YouTuber. I don't even consider myself a YouTuber, just a madman with a YouTube channel.
Either, right? These people are still alive. There's still people in prison. And furthermore, You know, it's like easy to be like, this is just the 80s and 90s. This is happening right now. I mean,
In what ways?
Through QAnon and Pizzagate. So that's sort of the
Yep. QAnon, Pizzagate, that perked my ears right up. Now I know people
Bro,
like
two
Tucker,
things that go,
not Tucker,
two things that go together, don't you know?
Matt Walsh. Yeah, Pizzagate was funny, and it probably did smear some people. And from what I know, completely absurd. But you know what?
I think Pizzagate to me has just become this weird thing of. I thought like the original meaning of it, but then it got quickly denounced, and it's like or changed, and it's like it blown up. So
isn't going on. Maybe some nut jobs still believe that. Same thing with QAnon. Who takes them seriously?
Well, a certain community we know does believe it, or fringe.
Okay, I don't even want to speculate on that, but making QAnon and people believe in Pizzagate to be serious people, that's like taking flat earthers seriously. But maybe he has something going on, or something even worse.
Most recent iteration, those satanic cult conspiracies now involving political figures and Hollywood actors drinking the blood of children to get adrenochrome or whatever the magical chemical is, right, in the basements of pizzerias and all that stuff in the U.S. And for us, I mean, this film, just this past week, there's an article, I think, in the Epoch Times. Did I say that right? I don't think
so,
did.
yeah.
Yeah, did I?
EPOCH, yeah.
Right. That basically there's a satanic ritual abuse survivor talking and saying, referencing our film and saying, no, I'm actually a victim of satanic ritual abuse. And
yeah, Epoch Times. They seem a little nuts out there. Used to see their ads. I even did a little video mocking their little ads a long time ago. I was like,
sure, I remember seeing Epoch Times around.
Yeah, I think there's still around. This isn't even that old. How old is this interview? But does anyone take them seriously? Like Newsmax? I mean, I'm sure some comments off 2 months ago.
You occasionally see something from them.
Yeah, I don't see their ads sort of being pushed anymore. That's what my video was on. Basically, cut it out, Epoch Times. I don't want to see your ads. Go away and go annoy other people.
I don't know, but they seem niche gets.
Yeah, it seems really weird to bring them up.
I have this weird thing about the people who see QAnon in the clouds and doing stuff like that. I'm just like, as the average person, you're more apt to run into the Twitter blue check mark of old prior to then running into a QAnon person.
Yeah, they're deep underground, and them bringing this up, I haven't even heard of it. I'm just looking into sort of it. Hell, that Q is in my thumbnail.
It is because it's funny. They actually what is it? That's a big thing. They all think it's connected like a thing, and it's like, oh, it's fringe or it's like that. I'm just like, okay, if you think of the absurdity, people think QAnon exists. Okay.
No, QAnon does exist. It's a very fringe little, it's like flat earthers, I assume. No one, well, I wish no one seriously.
The reason why flat earth,
there is people like Alex Jones with all these crazy theories he just spouts out.
Oh yeah,
so I'm not going to discount. And some people watch him as entertainment, knowing his entertainment, but some people actually believe the lizard people or the water, they're turning us gay.
Well, or you could be like the flat earth guy because he can't trust the camera, straps himself to a rocket and goes into the thing, and that's how he actually died.
See, the problem with all these conspiracy theories, if even some of these conspiracy theories are true, we're just all fucked. We might as well be on an alien ship in space being fed in Matrix style. I mean, yeah, they could be true, but to believe them true, you might as well just give up on life. And I would rather not believe some of these crazy, outrageous.
Yeah, that's why I said if something is so crazy, it's unbelievable, right?
Yeah, even if it is true, I want to see signs of it for myself.
Like
the Matrix. Matrix is a
everyone,
good example of that. The red
everyone
pill or
could,
blue pill. There was
like
evidence
everyone
in the
could,
world.
like the thing to it is, it's like David Iger, right? I think is the guy's name, who came up and perpetuated the modern myth of the hollow Earth.
What? There's a hollow Earth theorist
In the modern area. It's like David Icke or something like that.
It's like Scientology. I mean,
he believes like there isn't the hollow Earth theory. That it's like, okay, that's kind of.
I want to believe in this hollow Earth theory. I've seen Journey to the Center of the Earth. There's dinosaurs out there. If hollow Earth theory is correct, there's probably dinosaurs and all sorts of cool shit. So I might actually jump on that theory.
Okay, I would deep
the
dive.
implications are awesome. Sorry.
And the guy's like a former,
made me a believer.
The guy's kind of like a former footballer and other stuff that he's
so brain damage,
potentially, or damage. Yeah. So.
I saw.
Well, he's a footballer, like soccer person. And
okay, and
rugby.
You're talking about in a more Europeans.
But
aren't you American? Are you a secret European, Tiermon?
It's not even about that. It's just a familiar people who are look into strange things.
Are you a proto-American? I don't even know. I don't want to know if you're a proto-American.
No,
I would have to kick you off if you were. No, I'm joking about that. But
I'm an actual. I just because I learned.
Yeah. So much stuff. I'm making false accusations. See, just that title, false accusations, is having me throw false accusations at you now. I'm sorry. I exposure to that just has warped my mind.
This is 2023, right? So it is kind of scary. Like this is something.
I was looking for therapists, excuse me, last week, and I found a woman downtown Vancouver, and one of the things that she treated was ritual abuse. I was like people are still. They're still treating this like it's still within society right now. Like it was wild.
You know, we're repeating the mistakes of the past now.
So is he saying that there isn't any ritual abuse at all? It's just absurd. It's just a black and white thing. Because there are cults. Even if you want to say the Satanic Panic is completely out there, ritualistic abuse definitely would happen in cults, and cults are very real. As we were bringing that up, Jim Jones, and there's a whole bunch of crazy cults out there who believe in more psychotic things than even the Church of Scientology. Don't hate me, Tom Cruise, and strike me down with your devilish older charm. But yeah, and here we get into a whole little, at least it's a little section on QAnon. And I don't know why this is actually getting brought up in this. So this is making me skeptical about this actual documentary.
That's why I didn't want to take. That's why I didn't want to take this documentary at its word.
I'm definitely not going to take it as its word. I'm going to do the research and compare it to what you could find online. So, but I want to go through this just baseline, almost nothing. Had you do some research, which actually came in handy. I mean, yeah, me being ignorant on this, probably not the best thing to go into, but sometimes being ignorant on something and just going into something will give your mind a better understanding of basically what questions you want to ask later when you go into it. Don't form your opinion. Hear people out. Try to figure out the questions you want, then dive into the facts of the matter.
I mean, stuff gets, when you start taking old theories and then mixing them with like stuff like QAnon, then you start bringing in a political slant, because we all know that everyone knows that with a brain, when you start mixing these philosophies, bad stuff occurs. Am I right? Because it muddies the water, and it's like,
yeah. Oh, well, we got a first-hand account. President Redacted. Tinfoil hat wearer here. I can't rule out the possibility that Q was created and pushed by the government to make the American right look bad and discredit the concept of elites. That's just me, though. Very good insight there.
That's actually part of it is if you actually dig into what QAnon is, it predates the whole modern right wing movement. If you go by it, weird fringe people like years ago.
Yeah, I wonder if it has some relations to the Q documents, which is a theory about the Bible, of how that came to be. The Q documents.
Like there's a whole like little background that supposedly the ideas of QAnon I've heard go back to like the 70s or bizarre
Or the
stuff.
Illuminati.
It goes
Not
back to like
Illuminati.
it goes like back to like the 70s. It's like people who come up with it and then they trace it back a little back further. It's like okay, I guess how did you ever find this?
Yeah, I mean, conspiracy theories are fun to get into, but
validity.
You should take it with a grain of salt, personally. Okay, keep an open mind, but don't be so open that your brain falls out. See what makes sense.
Right.
Reality is malleable. That is correct. People can be manipulated into a lot of crazy things out there.
People
Okay.
are extremely malleable.
Yep, and some people are more malleable than others. I would like to believe I'm not susceptible to this stuff, but I can't discount that. I'm try to keep a skeptical mind about everything, so I don't fall too far prey on some of these crazy things. Because some of the conspiracy theories could be correct, but you know what? Unless they have good evidence to back them up, I'm not going to give them much merit.
Because a lot of people believe QAnon and Pizzagate. People have been actually harmed by these theories.
This is, I mean, this for us, this is another like layer.
Yeah, evidence. Okay, a lot of people believe it. There's just a lot to question there. Yeah.
To this film, I mean, what does it mean to be human, and why do we believe in things even when there's no basis or concrete evidence or no basis in reality, right? And this whole thing about storytelling, constructing reality is definitely an element to this story too, and all the different ways storytelling works, right? Like you share information with a story, you educate somebody, but if you don't like somebody, you can also make up a story to ruin their life and their, like storytelling is great, it's terrible, it's part of being human.
It truly, like when we can't explain the things around us that are happening in our life, the easiest thing to fall back on is a lot of the time Satan, right? So
yeah, even going back farther, the myths were pretty much people just trying to construct ideas of how the weather worked and all sorts of things out there in the world, trying to figure out how things work. So they attribute lightning to a man.
Do you remember I brought up earlier because the current modern iteration of the Church of Satan was largely formed by Anton LaVey in like 1975. And it's like, oh, that's a credible movement. A church that was only been like around for 40 years. And it's like a
Thank
tax
you, Miss
write-off.
Sparkles, for checking us out. Hopefully all our talk of Satan doesn't scare you away. We had Jab in here, but his connection dropped out. Such a noob.
But
up his internet game.
But you're getting what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
Like, it's a movement that's so relatively, and it's mostly was formed maybe out of a tax write-off or something, and they're a meme because, like, by the 90s, if you ever did it, anyone who knows anything about Anton LaVey, he was kind of a meme for a while, and it's like, oh, it's like a meme culture or strange. It's like, I'm more apt to believe a Wiccan than them. But
yeah, so the Church of, they're going to be getting into the Church of Satan. I think they're putting way too much credit. How can you actually? I'll let them get to it. I just don't know how you could believe someone, even if the Church of Satan is sort of like, a meme and a reactionary to the Christian movement. How can you actually believe the word of someone who jokingly, air quotes around jokingly, say they are part of the Church of Satan, the father of lies? You would assume someone like that would be very capable of lies.
I want to bring up, why do people believe Scientology? Because, If you go back to the South Park Scientology episode that led to Chef leaving the show, Isaac Hayes, he was an actual Scientologist. South Park actually covered like when they dumped the aliens into the volcano and stuff. That's actually what they believe. And
oh yes,
and
they have some weird beliefs. So did the Mormons.
But it's like, and it was L. Ron Hubbard literally came up with a book so he could protect money.
Probably to con people out, but who knows? You can.
He wanted to protect himself because at the time, right? Which is funny about Hollywood, even though they could make obscene amount of money, right?
Yeah,
they would lose a lot of it to taxes and stuff. So he found a way to make it work.
Yes, but it is possible to buy into your own hype. I do believe that could have been the case. I do believe that it started off as sort of a joke, a tax write-off. But to say that he didn't sort of bought his own bullshit at a certain point, I think that's an assumption you can't make. Yes, it definitely seems like he did it as a tax write-off and just see what he can do, but human mind works weirdly, and when you're considered a prophet,
the other weird stuff about the Church of Scientology popping off, because I know you and I are a fan of Fallout. What are the homologists based upon?
It's just a parody of that. That's a little bit more weird. It's not a direct thing, but yeah, sort of a nod towards that. Hubbard, okay, way too obvious.
But it's the idea of, right, they developed their own culture. They may have been a tax write-off, but they eventually developed other stuff. Like they became anti-medicine, other crap.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff, and you don't know where it came from. I'm sure there's a reason for it somewhere down the line, but it's hard to get at the heart of that given that particular cult of Scientology. And I'm very confident in saying Scientology is a cult. Mormons, maybe not. And I'm Jehovah's Witnesses. I won't automatically discount them as that, but Scientology, yes.
Who was the King of Queens actress who left the church and started?
Yes, Leah something. Yeah, she has a very famous story. I think she was part of the movie. I don't know. There's been a lot. I think she might have milked it too much. Who knows? Let's not go too deep into the Scientology. Yes. They might try to cancel us or silence us with their mighty magical Tom Cruise smile powers.
Oh, it's part of who we are. The big thing that we saw was like it happened once, it's happening again, and it's probably going to happen in the future.
You mentioned though that when I guess the first Satanic Panic of the 80s and 90s, when that was going on, there was a lot of social changes happening. I think it was more visibility about LGBTQ folks, for example. And I think even now we're seeing more visibility of like trans individuals, and LGBTQ folks are also.
Yeah, them pushing this sort of narrative seems a little bullshit. The Satanic Panic. I don't think this is a direct reaction. Yes, the rise in homosexuality, the AIDS epidemic, and other issues definitely probably tied into this. Because
there was a time I used to just, sorry for the sigh if people heard that. There was a sigh. That's a sigh of a person who's covered stuff like this or just looks at this, tries. Like, I'll call a spade, and when bullshit is really bad, because even admit when me being conservative, my side is wrong. But, like, to go to say the activists who actually fought at, like, the Stonewall or the Stonewall riots in, like, New York, they would laugh and be disappointed at the activist now.
Probably. They faced real oppression, real threat. And I'm not saying all activists and protesters.
They face real threats.
Yeah, I'm not saying not even the protesters and rioters nowadays don't face any threats at all, but comparison to how how against the grain it was in society and how much the police would come down. Hell, Lenny Bruce got Lenny Bruce got arrested for public profanity in his comedy act back in the day.
What do
Now
you
you can
mean?
pretty
Like
much say
Harvey?
whatever you want
What's the
in most
famous
public
one that got
places.
shot over it, or also got shot? Was like Harvey Milk. Like the guy, it's like, and to bring this up as well, like if you're going to incorporate stuff, there's a difference between MLK and Malcolm X era of civil rights versus someone like Al Sharpton.
No, you can't say that. You can't say that. They're just going to say that's a straw man.
That
You're
doesn't
misunderstanding the past.
what they
I'm joking, of
actually
course.
they had to walk through southern towns or do stuff, and they were mostly non-violent or never did things. You didn't know what was going to happen.
No. Like Rosa Parks just sitting, not moving from her seat. It was probably really tense and really scary for her at that time.
Well, you know what I'm
was going
talking
against
about.
the grain of society.
But you know what I'm talking about. That's actually the people. They had dogs sicked on them, tear gas, and all they were doing was marching. Am I right?
Yeah, that's how history's portrayed, and I will believe it because there are pictures.
And then
there's
these
enough
modern
evidence.
people think because they can go do stuff, they have the same problem of intolerance that you were dealing with. It's like, and the last thing I'll say on this, it's like finding an actual person. You know, they bring up like trying to find a like I'll bring this up, but why are like Nazi ideology so hard to find?
Because they were pushed underground.
Yeah. Basically, what people don't know, and if you look into this, is like, what do you know of a foundation myth? Post World War II, we said anything that related to the Nazi Party and their belief is this bad. We established, the victors established, never have this ideology popped up again. Deny it everywhere it exists. Stamp it out like you step on a spider, right? And that's why you don't see an actual person like that anymore. They salute in uniform in a closet.
Yep. And they hide their power level. So they could be anyone, and that's really scary.
It's not really
they
scary
see
at
secret
all.
Nazis and neo-Nazis, and they probably morph
They
into
don't
something
exist.
like Nick Fuentes? Yeah, Nick Fuentes, probably homosexual cat boy who is half
don't confuse him with
something.
Milo.
Yeah, there's some weird things.
Well, like
out
seriously,
there.
like if you look into the actual membership of the Klan is like 5,000 people membership.
Yep. And they're probably in a bunker somewhere, drinking turpentine or moonshine derived from something really nasty, which probably contributes to their
Hey, and they're so
stupidity.
in the backwoods. I live in the South. I could go all the way over to Mississippi. I used to have family. You would never see these people. And I'm just like, okay, there's secrets everywhere. I'm just like,
Yep. Just poisoning the well and trying to pretend like all these people are out there and making such social change, and it's all because of the LGBTQ plus A who.
What did I say? We live through moral panics or moral situations, right?
Yes, people will always find other ways to other people. You want to feel superior, and now the tipping point is very balanced, probably, and at least culturally. At now, it's probably at an equilibrium. Yeah, equilibrium.
Not to tease something we might do later on, but I've always wanted to do a piece on how magical the 90s was and what just shattered it. Because I feel in the 90s we grew up. We knew about the prior era. We didn't have the internet, but we were smart enough from our forebears to,
Yes.
civil rights was
Nowadays,
solved.
they have all the knowledge at
You
their
have all the
fingertips
knowledge
and
at
no
your
one to actually teach them, so they don't know how to
like
apply that knowledge
the
generally.
90s was like this weird time where it was peace until like the early 2000s, and I would just love to know what happened and it shattered. It's like we had a lot of social conundrums solved. It wasn't like, oh, racism died. You didn't find one. You had like the weird case studies like American History X and other things that would tackle that stuff, but we knew how stupid it was.
Well, yeah, for the most part, most people were against racism in the 90s. But, that also might be a problem once racism was
Like,
reducing. There's always going to be
there's
someone,
this thing
some
like
old guard to sort of push forward this idea so they don't become obsolete in the future.
it's like the educational. We were educated to spot it, to deal with it. We didn't say, oh, it doesn't exist. We were like, oh, that's what you are. But we let it to be a little fringe in the corner. Every school had the little goth kid or punk rock kid. Every school did. Right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
how did we get where we are now? That's really difficult to say. I can speculate, but
That's why I said it's not like we're nostalgia people. It's just I want to know what actually went wrong. And it's like everything shattered. And I don't
well,
think
most people will say it was never right, but I would disagree with those people. And I don't think it was idealistic utopia. I think it was just sort of us coming to term with racism and slowly
whatever
us
cultural thing we had.
overcorrected and us and people pushing it too far to overcorrect.
I don't think
It's
it
always
was
going to
that
be how the
either.
scales go.
That maybe
Well,
is something we could do in the future, but I just bring that up. I'm just like, we had no moral panics. We understood it. If something happened, it could be made sense. Now
yeah.
everyone has the internet, but they can't make sense of these things.
Yes, they have all the knowledge at their fingertips, but really no one telling them how to apply it. That's my personal theory on it.
I agree.
I'm sure it's way more complex than that, and that might be a reductive statement there. But I think there's a certain grain of truth in that philosophy. You need teachers. Knowledge on its own can be misused in several different ways. Same with technology.
Getting more acceptance, right? And I wonder if that's playing a role. Just that, the more we're seeing changes to like gender ideas around gender and race. If that's somewhat maybe having a role in getting people to go down these kind of dark paths, like QAnon and that sort of thing.
Well, definitely. I mean, typically those are the people who have the devil in them, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then I think technology too is also another factor in this, right? Like daytime TV, talk TV was the thing in the 80s and 90s that spread this everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, social media did it for QAnon and Pizzagate. And Steve and I always talk now that AI is, we're right at the cusp of it.
Yeah, and why are they going on about Facebook? They generally stamp out any of the dissent, even.
Well, I think
they
if
came
you're-
down on a Parler. Why actual research showed a lot of the organization for QAnon, those fringe groups, happened on Facebook.
It happened on Facebook, and you're like, if you're talking Parler, right? Parler's worst mistake was it never did its own server, so it just went to like a common server that could be shut down. But
yes,
that
centralization.
They because bear in mind, I have to recall Pizzagate, but if I recall about Pizzagate, it was an overblown story by people mainly on Twitter. And I'm just like, it's weird, like how Twitter is a better, more stabler place now that Elon runs it. And it's kind of, at least this is my opinion. Anyone could just disagree. Like, Twitter is always going to be a dumpster fire full of autists on both sides, okay? Like, I don't think it's going to get better. I think it's just a fairer platform now that both sides can fact check each other.
Oh, I love the community notes. They create some.
It's a
great
lot better. It's a lot better. You
I
can
agree.
actually have discourse on it.
Yeah, and Elon's talking about removing the block. I don't know if you want to go that far. I sort of like the
Well,
block
you
I
need
earned
to
recently, so
Okay,
it's sort of sad.
Okay, you as a user of a platform, you don't want to see something, you could block them. That's fine. But a lot of these people are bringing up moral crises caused by Twitter. It's really funny after when Elon bought Twitter as a prime example.
Yeah, they sort of had a moral panic about him buying Twitter.
No, it's just, think of it this way. There was a whole side of the FBI and other government groups were using Twitter to push messages. Like, you would research something. No, this is a proven thing. You could find they set up an office with like 30 or 40 agents just to sit and monitor Twitter. And like Japan, right? What do you think trends in Japan? Video games, K-pop, J-pop, right?
Yeah.
Oh, they had a thing of when the block got removed on what was popular in Japan. That's what it was. Anime, gaming, standing stuff, right? Not politics. But for some bizarre reason, Twitter people who use Twitter in Japan would be told politics were a really big deal over there. Okay.
It's the funnel of information. Even now, the mistranslation of some tweets cause a lot of problems. Like I saw something about let me not go deep into it, but the mistranslation of language and culture probably across about the FBI monitoring all these places. I mean, that's probably a standard practice, and to give it back to, I have to push back a little bit on that. To say that they automatically Twitter FBI's interaction with Twitter before could be something more nefarious, but it could be something more regular.
They were using social media to influence things. Like Silicon Valley didn't have any kind of stuff pushing an ideological message that would make something seem bigger than it is, right? Vincent?
Through Twitter, yes, absolutely. They're always testing things on social media, but to automatically saying the FBI had a finger hole, I think there's a good theory to support that they probably had more influence than they should have. Yes, documents that they warned Twitter and probably had some allies on Twitter's side. But how on base our government had its fingers into Twitter, that's disputable. I'm just bringing up the fact
bring up the social media pushing a narrative because it implies and anyone who watches this, like Miss Sparkles, if you see this, not ignoring it, like it's not free flow. They see this agenda that you see something that is a minority of a minority is an actual thing. It wasn't until the whole big, and I've always been the guy who hates these social media trends. Like,
yeah, they're sort of there's a lot of trends that seem to just cover for a lot of other things going on. Like, sheesh. I can't even think of an example right now, but
because I'm not going to diminish what happens with like LGBTQ plus people, but like when you see the discussion of like people in the 90s, yeah, we accept people are gay and they exist. You have your own lives. But social media will tell you, 30, 40, 50% of an upcoming population is LGBTQ plus. You're like, what?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's true. The manipulation of data online is just freaking insane.
And this is why I don't trust a lot of Silicon Valley types. And I swear, like, I've always jokingly called like Zuckerberg, like, you, what is it? I'm
A
often
robot? A
well,
replicant?
no.
There's
It's
that meme about
I'm
him being a
recalled
robot.
of the film.
Mr. Robot
I'm
Dude.
recall of a film. If people have never seen it, it's the James Bond film Tomorrow Never Dies. The big plot of the film is a newspaper reporter, and this was done in 98, like in 1998. And his whole thing was he was going to start a war between two nations, being the British and the Chinese, and with a stealth ship. And he goes, but my newspaper and my upcoming internet reaches more people than a government could reach.
Yeah.
Now,
I
flash
do remember
forward
that.
years later, and how scary predictive that is.
Yeah, those who control information controls the mind of the majority, I would say. So there is a power in the information gathering. And the breaking up, dissolving of monopolies, I don't think happens that often nowadays. I don't even know if that's a good thing or bad thing. It's just a tide of the nature
I
we
mean, that's a
live in.
separate thing, right? Because you don't see it that. Like, that's why the concept of cyberpunk is an actual thing, right? It's
Yeah,
a
they
game.
can hack brains in that, and
It's
we
like a
might
game
get to that
system.
point.
It's like a game system, right? Like in cyberpunk, it started off as like
Well, you don't
the
even
big
have to go to
corporations.
fiction. There is psychology that can just trick the mind. You don't even you can use a sort of that cyberpunk futuristic technology to just illustrate how there are hacks for the brain. There's
It's also
mentalists who can
It's
cold
also
read
the fact
people
we
and
haven't
make
been.
them believe that they're psychics because they can read them so well and lead them how they want. Not everyone can be led that way,
Yeah,
but
there's
most
also this
people.
philosophy too that we have all these laws on the books to deal with monopolies or deal with a malicious company. Let's say something like the size of Disney became so abusive, the government could break it up, but they don't break it up. But
Okay.
then they go, okay, oh, but we only investigate you when you want to do a merger, and the SEC has to allow it, like Microsoft acquiring EA, right? Like, or let's say somebody acquires, like when AOL was gobbling everything up, or T-Mobile, right? You control a large section.
Maybe Miss Sparkles has something that you might know better than me. Have you seen Mr. Medicare and the Finders? I know Mr. Medicare, but I'm not deep into the lore of that. Diamant?
The
Oh,
Finders? I don't.
okay. I might actually have to look into that.
Thank
He
you.
reads the FBI files, and it's about the Satanic Panic. Yeah, I'm sure they had their hands in that. Like they sort of had their hands in the Red Scare, so it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I'm not
Well,
saying Twitter didn't have a strangle. I didn't have an influence on Twitter, but I'm sure it was very subtle. I'm sure
so
they
like
wouldn't
the
want their own mechanisms to be discovered. So I'm
so
just
uh
thinking the Twitter files uncovered too much
Miss
is a little
Sparkle,
bit too much.
like let me just you do bring up an interesting point. Like, I would encourage you to look into the actual history of the Red Scare and what Hoover did with the FBI, because this is where when I
Yeah,
know
even
that
if it was against dirty commies, that sort of
he kept
paved.
files on everybody.
Yeah,
Like
and he
he
probably witch hunts people who weren't really even commies or even a danger to the country. Because not all commies back then were dangers to the country, but probably most were.
well, most of the people accused weren't. Like
Yeah.
Hollywood was like, it's like Yuri Bleshinov said later on. everyone thinks the communists work in Russia worked in stealing plots and plans. No, they just did influence. You had communist sympathizers versus actual communists. They would inject money into Hollywood and create sympathizers, not while having it. And they never really found the actual, very rare did they find the actual communistic people pushing it, like the people who were influenced. Hoover himself kept files and turned the FBI into a institution that became so powerful domestically it could smear anybody. And that is why the FBI director is limited to 10 years.
Wow, I'm definitely going to have to go back to old Mr. Medicars. It definitely aligns with this sort of line of thinking. And you have to know, it's good to know the past to predict the future.
Yep.
But let's get back on point to this.
Yes.
I admit that was a really good divergence, but
like, what is going to happen?
Coming in hot.
We were just watching a video actually before we started of an AI created political commercial. Yeah.
And it looks real, like
and it's
100% real.
For the Republican Party.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you knew exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah.
his clarification. Oh, for the Republican Party, there's definitely a very strong lean in here, which is sort of deceptive, in my opinion.
There's not a slant at all.
Oh, there isn't a oh yeah, there's no slant here. They're just honest queer gay documentarians, and these interviewers are given a lot of leading questions, but no slant.
Yeah, it's scary. Yeah. Well, you mentioned, like, when I was watching the documentary, because we were talking about Satan, there's an actual Church of Satan. What is that? Because I didn't know what it was until I watched the documentary.
The Church of Satan.
Okay, yeah, Miss Sparkles, what is this? This is two gay guys created a documentary on the Satanic Panic after over 30 years. And if you rewind, you'll find they try to link subtly go into, I'm thinking the interview is very telling of basically their perspective going into this. And they talk about this woman, these people they're interviewing after 30 years and saying give their truth. And
this is based upon to get the idea, Ms. Sparkles says, we were trying to research stuff like during the Satanic Panic, you'll hear about two incidents. One is Michelle Remembers, which is based on a book that was by manipulated psychology, and the other one is false accusations of sexual abuse in a school. Michelle Remembers is what they did the documentary on, and it's on Satan Wants You. And we have been trying to find this, and this just came out, and it's supposed to be on Tubi. And I tried to look for it, and I'm gonna try to find this myself.
Yeah.
Vincent is too, but it's like I tried to do research and find any old Dateline stuff on Michelle Remembers, and you can't find it as good as you can find other stuff. And this is what they're talking about. And just because this is where the only thing we have to use right now without doing further research. And they're like saying it's related to QAnon, and clearly this program.
And Pizzagate, don't forget about Pizzagate.
Lord.
That's almost a meme at this point. QAnon is probably a bigger deal than.
But we will look into that, because I tried to look into that and that didn't come across my research,
So I am getting really curious about this. I stumbled upon this because of a kooky theory I had about the Jonah Hill thing, how they were talking about therapeutic language being weaponized, blah, blah, blah. And I remembered sort of the case about Christine Blasey Ford after like a couples therapy, all of a sudden bringing up Brett Kavanaugh sexually harassed her when she was in a couples therapy meeting. and sort of
Oh,
her coming forward, why he was
and
being
then, like,
nominated.
oh,
Awfully
yeah.
good timing. I mean, I'm not going to say that either her as a psychologist or the therapist sort of led her with this sort of same sort of issue with the recovery memory therapy, but that's what led me back
I
to
mean,
the
would
Satanic
you
Panic.
argue that the Rose McGowan thing like that led to the Me Too movement and over dramatization of it?
Yeah, definitely.
Because like Rose McGowan was like of charmed fame and being married to Marilyn Manson at one point was like, oh, well, this occurred and blah, 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 blah. And all these people were getting Me Too'd because, 10 years ago, X guy bothered me.
Yeah,
And I'm,
some people just really slim cases in Me Too, and it finally, I think,
I'm not going to
after the
defend.
Johnny Depp trial of Amber Heard's, I think people started to see the light on that sort of Me Too, the flaws of that. I mean, don't get me wrong, Me Too did have some benefits, but
Harvey Weinstein was casting couch culture. That's
yeah,
always existed, though.
yeah,
All the
that
way
probably
back to
always
Marilyn
has
Monroe.
existed, okay, and he might have been the most blatant about it. So, and I don't think they even really got into some of the issues a lot of the children's stars did. Like, what was that case? The 80s, that one guy, Corey Feldman, I think. Feldman and Feldman, on Corey and Corey, I think, both brought out sort of the child abuse that goes on. And even after the not Harvey Weinstein, guy in House of Cards,
Kevin Spacey.
It sort of reflected that sort of stuff. After all that came out, there's really no exploration about powerful people in Hollywood sort of abusing children actors. That just went away. And I think that's a shame. There's probably still an element of that goes on in the shadows. So, and they brought up earlier about sort of hyperbolic Hollywood stars drinking blood, and I think they're exaggerating that. I'm sure there's plenty of
And this
sexual
is
abuse.
post what the music awards shows or whatever, where Matt Smith did the Satanic style performance.
Let's
Where
not even talking about Little Nas and his sort of devil worshiping style. Maybe he was trying to be ironic.
what was that? A whole award show that I kind of remember. It was like Matt Smith dressed up like that, and then Madonna tried to relaunch her thing by doing her typical Madonna stuff, perverting something on Christianity.
I am sort of going down a wrong rabbit hole, but still, they sort of gave cover for it by saying absolutely ridiculous claims about Hollywood, and that tends to be the case.
And I don't think that award show was saying that they followed this. I think a lot of them did it for shock factor. Because if anyone knows Madonna, Madonna does stuff for shock factor. The Sam Smith thing was probably done to just be edgy.
Okay, you said Matt Smith. I'm like, what happened to the 11th Doctor? You got the name wrong. Okay, good. Yeah, I remember what you're talking about.
It's that whole
horrible
award show they did, like, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's sort of I'm not going to say it's all connected, but there is a certain amount of this that I do see being reflected in just this interview. Man, just so many odd things about this. It just strikes me that no one's really looked at this. But maybe no one wants to look at it because this stuff is ridiculous. As you said, we're finding it tough to find this documentary or any of this stuff. Maybe we haven't looked hard enough yet. I definitely haven't, but Jimont definitely did look into it. And the Mr. Mediger, okay. There's a lot of bad stuff in Hollywood. I agree.
Like when they try to distill it down, it's basically instead of following these rules, like in Christianity of the things you're supposed to be, they just celebrate humans as a whole. So where we have greed, we have all of these kind of things that are considered negative. parts of our lives, but the Church of Satan looks at humans as a whole person, as a whole thing, and they want to celebrate that.
Yeah, and what I love is, so we have a former high priestess of the Church of Satan, Blanche Barton, as one of the participants in the film.
Yeah, this seems really twisted here. I mean, maybe they are just as they're claiming, but I frankly just don't believe people who has this Church of Satan wouldn't have some nefarious motives. You know, the sort of double blind, oh, we just joke about being the Church of Satan. Of course, it's ridiculous to assume. Of course, it would be ridiculous to blah, blah, blah. It almost seems like a cover that a lot of people use. You know what I mean? This certain section, them hyping up the Church of Satan here, seems extremely odd to me that they make this a point and they have this person in the. So yeah, I need to see this documentary to see how they frame this, because these people interviewing them, like, oh yeah, well, you sort of let the audience come to their own perspective, and I'm starting to think that's probably bullshit, but I'm not going to say anything. Mm-hmm.
See, James,
says,
we are talking about this is about we were doing a little dig to see and little hair into the origins of satanic panic. What caused
Yeah,
it?
we're looking back, we're looking forward of how supposedly how people are making the satanic panic into sort of the trans issue. They're just tying it to the
And
right
apparently
wing.
he's tied it back into QAnon and Pizzagate.
Yeah, Red Scare, same thing with Red Scare. Just because we were fearful of commies in the past means anyone who has any concerns at all about leftists or communists or anyone of that type, they're just crazy. It's just the Red Scare over again. Anyone who thinks the LGP is grooming children or anything like that, yeah, they're just recalling the satanic panic 2.0. No. I can almost believe them with how Matt Walsh talks, but it's the all or nothing philosophy of like Gamergate, where they just dismiss the ethical concerns because there's a few bad actors in Gamergate harassing people. Just because some bad things happened out of it, you can't just wholesale say there was nothing wrong. I'm not saying the satanic panic or the Red Scare was anywhat good, but they're not even giving it a chance that any of these people might have did something. Maybe it wasn't satanic. So we are looking this over and just looking through this before we go into deeper research. One of my crazy ideas, just starting into something and make it into a stream series. Investigate something, do research, come back and try to discuss it in more detail. But maybe I'm just too esoteric for my own good.
You know, basically, Satanism is not a tolerance of your differences. It's a celebration of differences, right? It's like we celebrate how different everyone is. And I thought that was such a, like, oh, who doesn't want to be part of that?
And it's a complete opposite of what we've come to know as Satan, right? And I thought it was really interesting that insurance companies played a role in Michelle Remembers. Do you want to go down that? Like, can you explain to us how that happened? Because I was like, of course.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Money's involved.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing, like both in Canada, the US, the UK, that's happened, right? So it's like, you know, especially in Canada and the UK where there is what's the word?
I'm thinking this point has some legitimacy. Well, the fact it also aligns with big pharma and money is bad, but because I'm thinking what they're doing here is sort of like a sandwich of facts, something people can get on board. Then you have this little middle section here that seems a little questionable of what they're bringing up. And I think we're coming to less biased facts, but we'll see. I haven't actually fully went throughout this.
I'm looking for healthcare, obviously, where doctors are billing the hour, like the government in the US is different too, but these doctors are billing and they're bringing you in for like 7 sessions a week for hours or maybe 8 hours a day and billing for it. And then the insurance companies are on the hook for it, right?
And they were talking like millions of dollars, like over the course of a year. And so they kind of look at it and they're like, wow, I have one of these patients. Now I can bring in their family members. And all of a sudden I'm making like $5 million a year. And so it really turns into a scam.
And this had to do with the therapists that were talking to people who were having these memories, that these awful things that happened to them as part of the Satanic Panic.
Yeah. And I mean, here in Canada, we should say too, like so, Victoria, Michelle remembers, that's one thing. There was a case, like cases in Southern Ontario, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and a really big one in Saskatchewan. It's not just a US thing. This happened here too, all at the same time as the US, the UK, Europe, Italy, Brazil, like it's Australia, New Zealand. This was a worldwide thing. And Larry, I mean, we found one newspaper article, he consulted, it said close to 1,000 cases. 1,000 of these cases.
That's a lot of money.
And it really seeped into popular culture, right? Because I think, Dungeons and Dragons.
Music.
Music,
Okay,
heavy metal.
Let's pause it there. Okay. So these guys are actually part of the Satanic Church? These two guys? There's so much proof that makes these people feel invalid, in my opinion. Everything. Yeah, there's a lot of horrible things out there in this world. I'm not trying to discredit anything they're saying. I do believe that they believe everything they're saying, but just some of the sort of framework that they're working under seems a little sketchy to me. I'm all this skepticism. They're even going to talk about skepticism. I think you should go in with skepticism and try to explore your own bias, uncover your own bias beforehand and check it afterwards to sort of get into the greater issues. Yeah, there's just so much weird stuff in here. It's hard to tell really how it's going.
I remember an X-Files episode referencing the Satanic Panic. I mean, how this was really widespread. Like it really affected the public imagination in a lot of ways.
And I remember the SVU episode with Gamergate. Okay. Does anyone really talk about that?
Ways, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it was hard not to. You hear these wild things and your mind can just go wild with it, right? You can think of anything. And it really seeped into all parts of culture at the time. Like religious horror was gigantic at the time. It's funny because...
Yeah, definitely. I agree. All the factors sort of mesh together to create the perfect storm for people to sort of grift, so to speak. Definitely the psychologist who convinced his patient, who's currently his wife, Michelle, definitely wanted to take advantage of this. I don't know if the psychologist knew about this and was trying to become like famous off of getting his patient, because this definitely seems weird that he got his patient to write this book, then he married her. There's some issues there. And they're going to actually bring this up. Michelle remembers, and she refused to participate in the doc. So
in the book, you can actually see references to like the Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby, like somebody's head's spinning around.
Halfway through, Michelle remembers there's a woman who comes to one of the satanic rituals and her head spins. Like it's
yeah.
What's funny about that book is the cover looks so much like a Stephen King novel.
Right? Like Misery.
Yeah. Or, any like Pet Cemetery, one of those.
Yeah.
I think something that struck me is that people are believing this like satanic ritual abuse is happening. Millions of children are being abducted. But at the same time, we learn in the early aughts that the Catholic Church has been, there's a huge sex abuse scandal with children and priests, and they're covering it up. Women for years were not believed if they came forward with sexual assault.
Okay, just turning it on his head. I don't know if they're totally unjustified in bringing this up, but as I brought up on my own, Harvey Weinstein got turned away. There's a lot of injustice in this world that keeps on keeping on, typically, that just continues as the world spins. And it's those people in power who generally take advantage of that power structure. And just downright, see, I don't like the framing of this. Really skeptical of the framing of this, bringing up the church. And yeah, there definitely was an issue that was discussed, but how bad was it in reality? I would have to look into it. Definitely something else to add to the docket of how widespread this child abuse was in comparison. Maybe I'm looking too much into this, but this seems like a weird tangent to take.
Early odds that the Catholic Church has been, there's a huge sex abuse scandal with children and priests, and they're covering it up. Women for years were not believed if they came forward with sexual assault, but people would believe in Satanism. Like, it's just it's ironic, right? Like, why?
Yeah, definitely seems a little bit weird. Seems like a weak assertion. But did those women come with evidence, or were you just supposed to believe them? Okay, and what were they getting out of the exchange? Tiamon said Harvey Weinstein was just someone taking advantage of people trying to get into movies by using their body. Okay. Yes, he probably crossed the line and probably was rather sketchy, but did they get anything out of that? Probably for the most part, they got something out of it also. Calm down your phone, Tiamon. I heard that. That was you. You wanted to panic me with that, making me think it was my phone.
What?
But yeah, there's a lot in this that is, I can see where they're coming from in this perspective. It just seems incredibly biased to automatically assume the deflection. And maybe this was a sort of projection of the church. That's mainly the Catholic Church, though. So I don't know how much of that actually was ongoing in more Christianity. See, the problem with the Catholic Church is they forbade their priests had calm down with your breaths, Tiamon. Okay. And it's and you all heed it, but calm down, man. I can hear you like breathing out fire there. But yeah, did you have something you wanted to add to this? Is this why you're going off on your fire breath?
I would. Maybe it's just because you need just the mic, but thank you for the thing.
Okay.
It happens.
I was just making sure you weren't raging out on me or passing out.
I do love the projection, though.
It definitely does seem like a reversal. Uno reverse.
The character.
Okay.
I understand. I have this. I'm commonly known in circles I usually deal with as just dragon more than pigs here. So, but I appreciate. Now I just had to take a break because cats to be fed.
Oh, I know life. Okay, I fed my cats before I went in here, and I don't care if the rest. No, I fed all my animals. Yeah, I got everything settled before I sat down.
I tried to, but
sometimes things come up in the middle. Sometimes you need to go pee. Other stuff like that.
And then other things or animals are just needy or need attention.
Whoa. Was President Redacted have a comment that was too hot, or are you on the wrong thing? Don't new name check. Yeah, live chat. Yeah. Sparkle's got a very, very good point. But you know what? This is just practice for me. Practice for Tiamon to come on and learn his habits. And a way to cover it up by making a joke about breathing out fire. Wow.
I like
even I make mistakes. But yeah, this whole thing just definitely seems like projection. And I mean, they do definitely have a point. I don't want to diminish their point, and there is the church abuse, but I have a sense of Uno reversal card. And let me just move on because I don't want to push back on them too much because they're talking about something real that was probably happening. Why innocent people? I doubt all of them are innocent and they're just assuming it. And maybe it wasn't all ritual satanic. Sometimes it's just regular evil people without the sway of the devil to make them do it. Because common defense tactic. You're insane. The devil made me do it. Blah, blah, blah.
Why do we go to this extreme thing and not the most logical thing?
It's weird. I mean, we've talked about that a lot, right? Like it was like they were basically pointing their fingers saying like, look over there, while it was actually the church that was doing all the things that they said that everybody else was doing. Like it was like really crazy when you actually like
Inappropriate
look at it
is
from
good.
It's interesting. I mean, in Austin at South by Southwest, we had an indigenous journalist actually in the audience for our world premiere, and it was the final question of the night, and he just started, talking about residential schools and the Catholic Church, and that was a connection that we hadn't made.
Didn't
But
I bring this up?
The Catholic
Brought
Church
this
steal-
up in Canada.
Didn't I bring this up
yeah.
earlier, Tiamon? This famous
Yes,
debate.
you do.
The whole Lance Tale of Two Rabbits versus Lauren, and I think it was Counterpoints, or maybe he was the
I think
moderator
it's.
with
I
Sean.
remember this story from in Canada, especially. It was a bigger deal where they were accused of trying to get rid of indigenous tribes and force converting their kids. And then there was like a recent discovery of like a cemetery where kids died in the Catholic Church run school or whatever. It's like, okay.
Oh, I didn't mean to actually play that. Brain went weird. Yeah, I was thinking.
You remember, some people could find that story.
that's-
It was a real story-ish. It's like,
oh, okay. They're not. YouTube's not suppressing President Redacted again. Thank you for your service, man. Scale of Catholic.
oh, by the way, sometimes
kid-
YouTube.
hold on. I'm reading a comment. Scale of Catholic Church kiddle diddling is grossly exaggerated by our media and leftists. I do believe it did happen. I would have to do the research, but when you don't throw out any facts, there's higher rates in our public education system. Does that discredit the entire system, and what does it teach? Extremely good at porting. That's why they have to redact you, man. You're too presidential for YouTube. But yeah, that would be my baseline assumption going in, that you always exaggerate your side's narrative, no matter what that side might be. This
I will
is why
say this on the. I can say on that narrative. There's a reason, like even the greatest popes, like Pope John Paul II, was arguably one of the greatest like popes ever in history, because he was able to reach out to a lot of people. But his one downside, you could say, was the sexual abuse scandal, and there were accusations. They wouldn't let them get tried, or they would just move them around and bury it. The guy who replaced him kind of did the same thing, but he would eventually fire them or excommunicate them. But
Yeah,
it is very overblown, to a degree. But what I will say this, and I see this argument among left people. Christians don't monitor their own. Okay.
that sounds like a little bullshit, but
I've never heard
ahead.
that, because my argument, I had this argument with my discussion with my friend. I asked him, right, and with a local church, I have a big church in my local area, even a whiff, they suspended him as chief pastor because some crazy woman, it came out that she was like, the pastor was trying to hit on her in text messages. They suspended him, even though I guess it came out it wasn't even, he was trying to have an affair, and he's happily married with kids.
Mm-hmm.
And they just did an investigation. He never did anything like that or would do that, but he was not the head of the church. Based on any hint of impropriety, he would not have, he got like sidelined.
Okay. Well, it depends on the church. I
But
read
most
a book
part,
called
that's what Christians do. They don't bury this. Most people, if it's true, you're done.
Okay. There is also a pragmatic, well, at least I hear, according to a book called Fault Lines by a former Afrocentric pastor called Eddie it's called Fault Lines, How Social Justice Infiltrated. Quite an interesting book. I take it with a grain of salt, but sounds true to me. And, you know, saying social justice is actually in the church at this point, and it has been for who knows, at least 20 years, if not more, trying to get their way into that also. So saying all church is just right wing at this point is sort of reductive in some cases. I'm just pointing that out.
No, I will say on that thing, like the idea of SJW philosophy trying to infiltrate everything. Like, why would you go to a church that wants to talk about destroying the environment or other stuff? It doesn't make sense. Because if you believe God is your answer, you're not going to do anything. That's not going to be your main goal. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that doesn't make sense. Because a church is there, whatever religion you are. I say this with whatever religion. You're Judaism, you believe in Judaism, you believe you're whatever, right?
Yep.
You know,
you're going to have people at the top trying to abuse their power. And you probably have a lot less of that and a lot more accountability and the church institutes, but there are people who are going to fall through the cracks. And I'm sorry, A-Base Life, you must have been one of those kids who just fell through the cracks.
You know,
your fault for growing up in New Jersey.
You know what?
Sorry, man.
I'm sure he could. That's my dear friend Patrick, and I'm sure he has a good Catholic choir boy story for us eventually.
Okay.
Oh God, I gotta pay. No, but seriously, like, whatever church you go to or religion you believe in, it's very weird that you don't bring up, if they bring up social justice issues or current things. It's always weird to me. That doesn't strike me because that's where you're going to get closer to whatever your religion is. But that's just my view on it. You know what I mean?
No, I take that book, Fault Lines, How Social Justice Infiltrated the Church.
And we want to do a series on, we have to do more research for this. We're not going to throw this out.
Yeah, next week I'm going to throw it back
to
Cemetery Overlook.
We are going to have to.
That's going to be more of a fun stream where we talk about Leafy and all those crazy kids.
No, I was saying about, remember, we wanted to talk about how ESG and stuff got into gaming. But
yeah, it's just so hard to actually establish that sort of stuff.
It's hard to tell how it got into certain companies and how it started warping gaming. But, like, that's when I was, like, saying, how does ESG get into companies? Remember, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's along that lines of fault lines and SJWism. You hire a diversity department, and then that's how they worm their way in.
Yeah. Okay. Diversity training for the PR.
DEI or DIE, depending on how you look at it.
And sort of they get funding for doing good things, like Blizzard's sort of a machine to get the perfect diversity balance between their game characters. They brought up the sort of AI problem, and yeah, it's going to be an issue in about 10 to 20 years. Hell, China's probably abusing the hell out of it now, but they probably don't care about the bugs that need to be fixed out of it. But overall, there is a lot of things to sort of really connect everything. And this is just personally probably even a small piece.
Because if you look at it, right, I don't know if you guys want to look in this, and anyone who sees this in the future is look up. It's called DEI, DEI or DI,
Yes. I think
DEI
everyone's familiar.
and CRT, right? That's like sheer like how it gets into companies, and it's like $1 million.
That's not DEI is sort of a concept that's spun out of a related issue on CRT, but let's not go into CRT and even
Well,
try to say that. That's like saying wokeism
no,
nowadays.
what I'm saying is like
That's its own sort of
it's its
thing.
own industry, right? That it's like that's how it got into companies. That's how it gets into all these places.
Yeah, definitely the diversity push and how it's connected to things like ESG and just good marketing. ESG, see, that's so hard to actually figure out all the tangle weaves that I might just abandon that. Want to go a deep dive on Anita's Sarkeesian, but everyone's doing that, so I'll be doing
Not
my research
everyone's
on that.
doing that, I guess.
Oh,
That's
everyone
already
jumped on the fall of feminist frequency. I need to figure out what I need to do with it, so I need to do baseline research. But things just keep coming up to sort of distract me. Okay, life sometimes has a way, and maybe that will formulate at time, but that's future plans. But yeah, Tiamat definitely is bringing up some interesting issues for us to go in, but we're getting distracted and very vague.
no.
So
I just don't think. I think it's weird. They're trying to have a discussion on the Satanic Panic while bringing these weird ideas of QAnon and Pizzagate and other stuff into it. I'm just like,
yeah,
you're
it
eventually
definitely
a little
struck me
too.
as something worth going over video form and probably even looking into deeper. I mean, this is definitely not a big talking point, despite this being this interview, and I assume this documentary being 2 months ago. It's not something that made mainstream success. Maybe it's something that's even too far for most mainstream people, or maybe I'm just out of the loop and this is something that's going on underground wise to sort of seed the well to counter the Matt Walsh, what is a woman thing. But they're using more devious means. I can speculate all day on that, but definitely looking more into
I
it.
don't think this documentary. I know it got covered in certain circles, like
Yeah.
because I guess because they tried to relate it to what you think is the right doing. Not every Republican or right leaning person believes in QAnon. Now, what was funny is about this whole narrative of QAnon and the 2020 elections or whatever, right? That both sides believe that election was dishonest. But it's like, it doesn't make sense. No one's going to vote overwhelmingly for one Biden. It's like you're going to vote
They
for
were
Trump.
voting against Trump. That's my general belief. They created a
don't-
panic against Trump well enough, and he did nothing to counter the fears of those people.
Also, Trump didn't
pushing
do anything to help himself either.
I almost want to defend him, but I can't. Sorry, I'll
You
agree.
can't do it normal.
I want to try just to be fair, good face Gary, but you
See,
know,
I would love to I would love to see Section 230 reform actually come into place because we were talking about how big tech companies and other groups were abusing power, like YouTube does this and other people do this. But Section 230 reform died when Biden got elected because Democrats were starting to investigate it. So, I mean, that's just fun little fact.
So many rabbit holes to go down.
True.
Let's hear about how they spin the child abuse scandal, and it's almost done, hopefully.
And abusing them and then neglecting them to the point of death, right? Like this is what the Satanists were accused of, but it was happening
for sure
within the church. It was just
And they bring up the Canadian thing, which I think is BS now, and that's all I'm going to say. Already preempted him. I didn't even know he would bring up the Canadian issue.
We brought that up very earlier in the stream.
Yeah, I didn't even know. I watched halfway through, and I'm like, once they got to the QAnon and this stuff, I'm like, okay, I want to cover this video. So all this is new territory for me.
Well, since we talked about that, we mentioned that Michelle and Larry, was he a psychiatrist or psychologist?
Psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist. They actually met the Pope. What was in it for the church to be a part of this book and this what was happening with Michelle Remembers?
I mean, it just,
Whoa, they're making the church connection. Okay. I have to look into it. It seems a little sus to me, just because they felt like this woman was abused and they met the Pope. I would have to understand the circumstances of that. Have you looked into the research on why they met the Pope?
I didn't know that.
Well, you can find that in the research, but yeah. So
That's one of those things when you're trying to research this and someone could probably find out. Like, I tried looking for actual sources, but that's I found more on the McMartin Middle School scandal than this, because I don't understand how something this big doesn't have anybody who's actually looked into it. So
okay, yeah. Interesting stuff.
just got more people into the pews, right?
And one of the priests, thought he was going to make $1 million. Like they saw this as actual like a bestseller, like Jaws, right? Their editor in New York actually was the editor for Jaws. So it's like all you see, you dig into this, and that wasn't in the movie, but it was just there's so many layers.
Wow, Jaws, one of those movies that sort of created a panic just from the movie alone. Sort of like Psycho made a lot of women really scared to take a shower. I think my mother mentioned that she couldn't take a shower a month after watching Psycho, and couldn't go in the water for a couple months after Jaws.
Wasn't it also like when you saw it on TV that it scared kids and it created a
fear of clowns? Very possibly.
Chlorophobia.
Yeah, clownophobia that's been going on. I mean, it seems weird, but I think even Stephen King found it, projected his own fear of clowns, and that wasn't even its true form, but there is something weird about clowns. Just the circus in general is a breeding place for freakishness.
You are a circus, if you remember. You are a circus.
Oh, yes, I am a circus. I keep forgetting this. I'm the whole circus. That's going to become a meme. I will own it. Okay.
You need to own it.
That means I'm not only the clown, I'm the tamer. Am I the animals also if I'm the whole circus? I'm definitely the trapeze artist, with mental gymnastics. Sorry. A side tangent that you have to get into my personal lore to really know. So
your lore, I understand.
And I do not recommend anyone looking into
don't
lore.
look it up.
I mean, it's funny to see the claims being made about me, but it's autistically annoying.
To the story that you can't even fit it into 90 minutes,
That was the main thing. So many people just came up to us and were like, why can't this be a 3-parter or 4-parter? They just wanted more.
Yeah. Well, one of the people Michelle wasn't part of it. Did you ask her to be a part of it?
Yeah.
And she said?
She didn't want to participate. We contacted her twice over the course of about 6 months, and she didn't respond to the first email that we sent. And then 6 months later, she did respond, and she said she doesn't want to participate, which I understand. I mean, I think it's a weird part of your life to dive back into, and especially if
everybody else wanted to participate and all had perfect recollection.
Yeah, that was weird. The whole book, I took it for granted, but in retrospect, a lot of the themes were really fucked up. I mean, maybe that's what he was going for.
It's like if you people who are just showing up now, they went and talked to this lady or this family, and they had perfect recollection of all the events.
Well,
or close.
According to what these guys are saying, after 30 years, we went over that in the beginning, the skepticism that he just assumed that what story that they got told for the documentary was the truth. And I have a standard when someone says they have the truth. I say bullshit. Okay, just out of reflex. You might have a piece of the truth and have to relay that to the actual facts of it to come more. But since we can't question victims in today's society, or it's very frowned upon on questioning victims in today's society, it makes it just a level of skepticism that's lacking in this section for the need for skepticism. Maybe they'll address some of those issues, but I'm sort of thinking their skepticism is going to be very one-sided. Oh, you're right. You can't handle the truth. I probably can't. Yeah. I like Stephen King, but you got to admit some of his shit is meant to disturb you at a level. His Richard Bachman books, I think, goes balls to the wall, but even better. I'll stand those over almost anything he wrote under his actual name.
She didn't want to participate. We contacted her twice over the course of about 6 months, and she didn't respond to the first email that we sent. And then 6 months later, she did respond, and she said she doesn't want to participate, which I understand. I mean, I think it's a weird part of your life to dive back into, and especially if she doesn't want to recant or
Okay, stop breathing fire, Tiamont. I'm sorry. It's fine. It's fine. I'll remind you when your dragon nature resurges, and I'll try to be funny about it. Sorry.
What would you have asked her?
Oh God, I would have asked her, like, literally. I just wanted, like, this, at least in my head, was to create a space for her to tell her side of the story. Like, the last interview that we could find of them actually talking about this was in 1990. And then after talking to all the family, from what we understand, Michelle has never said, no, this is a lie, or basically, or this is true. So it's this gray area where I just would, if it wasn't us, maybe there's somebody else who can do it, but just to get what happened to her,
And I'm also really curious about how, when you start something and you end it, from your point of view as people who were telling the story, what did you learn at the end that you didn't know going in when you decided to make this project?
For me, I just didn't understand.
Well, I have to give him some credit. I was processing that thought about the gray area. He doesn't automatically dismisses, even though they're definitely leaning in the direction that all this shit was bullshit. They're still accepting that she won't admit it's true or not. It's somewhat of a bit of a mystery even to them. So I have to give them some credit for just not automatically dismissing that she was, but they probably go under the assumption her husband, her current, I don't even know if they're married currently, but the husband, who's her psychologist, who coaxed her into doing this book, they're probably going under the assumption it would have been his fault. That's my interpretation of that. Is this a weird? Oh, okay, no, it just looked weird. Sorry, I thought there was a weird symbol in the Satanic Panic there. Okay.
Understand how widespread it was. I didn't understand the Satanic Panic. I'm 42, so I grew up through the 80s, and I just didn't know. I didn't know how many lives it touched. I didn't know how widespread it was. It was just one of those things that you look at it and you're like, wow, just had no.
I will not co-sign on any of those comments. He probably is a weirdo, but is that a bad thing? Hey, base life. Definitely some of the time.
Idea.
Some stuff we can't discuss.
If there's one, I guess, like takeaway you want people to have from watching this film, what is? I'm thinking in the context of like we've talked about with QAnon and these kind of conspiracy theories. I mean, Trump's still talking about losing the election. People are really still susceptible to this.
And they, of course, have
this
to.
This is why I started seeing alarm bells early on.
With what exactly?
With these two people.
Yeah, they're definitely biased, and they definitely have relating everything to the right wing.
Because you saw the seeds of this later on, or I mean earlier
on. Yes,
sorry.
You definitely saw the seeds. Them trying to work it in. I see this as sort of a sandwich. You have the sort of the completely unbiased at the beginning. Then they
bring up
more the bread in.
Pizzagate.
Then you had the middle, and now they're getting to the end. It's sort of like the olive on top of the club sandwich. So you sprinkle actual facts or what I perceive as facts at this moment. I have no reason to doubt some of the claims they've made, but some of the comparisons just rub me a little bit of the wrong way. But yeah, absolutely, you can see the sort of bias here.
This sort of thinking. So I guess I don't know. What do you? Is there any like thing that we can do to, I guess, convince people not to go down these kind of rabbit holes?
You know, I personally come from a really cynical, skeptical family. So, like, there's a couple characters in the film that I think people can learn a lot from: the FBI agent Ken Lanning and the investigative journalist Debbie Nathan.
This reminded me, Mrs. Sparkles was saying something about the FBI. I will have to go through the Mr. Medicare. I like Mr. Medicare.
Yes.
Okay, overall. His recent stuff been a little bit fluffy, you know, just making fun of people like Ethan Routh and other locals. But I can understand, and he's winding down. When he gets serious, I can really respect him.
I mean, he actively retired, you know?
Well, he's sort of, the dude deserved it, especially, I wish him the best of luck. Really,
I mean, I don't know if he had cancer or something or a treatment.
Well, it could have been a troll, but I don't think he would do that. That seems even beyond him to do that.
I mean, maybe health is a reason. Like, I don't remember the exact reason, but I'm like, sometimes successful YouTubers, but he didn't nuke his archive or nothing, I don't think. He just retired and said, maybe one day I'll come back, but it's
like Jesus' second coming. Mr. Medicare 2. That would be.
Well, you know what's funny? He did quit it.
I have a mecha body now.
You know what's funny? At one point, I swear he did quit, and then he did come back.
Yeah.
Like something drug him out of. It's like I'm doing research on the commentary community if we ever wanted to talk about it. And I'm finding out these old commentary YouTubers are trying to come back. Like, I'm just like,
yeah, Leafy's here is back on Rumble. Rumble and Kick are giving people new life, new chances, new competition. I really hope.
God, Rice Gum is trying to come back out of the
that's one commentary YouTuber I could do without. The most vapid, vain, hell, even the Paul brothers have more self-awareness than Rice Gum.
Okay.
And I still think
that's a stretch.
No, it's not a stretch. Rice Gum is just like dumb incarnate. He's like a brick within a soft little fleshy little skin. Pale thing. Hope there's no Rice Gum fans. Oh, sorry.
I don't know if anyone in modern era.
Sorry if you're a Rice Gum fan, Miss Sparkles. I don't mean to make you cry. I know.
There's
I'm taking her comment out of context. I know. Yeah. I will have to go through that. Hopefully there's an archive of that. Yeah, let's not dwell on that. No, shouldn't have brought it up because, yeah, it is disappointing.
I think everyone needs some more skepticism in their lives. Ask people questions. Ask why, right? And also take the time to think about rumors when you hear them instead of just jumping on the bandwagon and riding off in the sunset. So
yeah. It's really tricky though. There's so many influences in our lives, and I think it's really hard to kind of navigate through and figure out what's real and what's not real. And I think just as we go into the
Did you see?
Ouch!
God,
that would have sucked. Oh,
Jesus.
I still think he's a vapid brain, but doo-doo brain. But that's not something I would wish on anyone. A child. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Sparkles. That's definitely a good recommendation that will come.
Oh, she miscarried. That's not good.
Not quite as bad. It's still harsh, depending on how far along you are in a pregnancy. You can get attachment. It's worse when the child's out and something happens. Oh, sorry. But yeah, I can almost agree with the skepticism that they're proclaiming to have, but the skepticism, like the skeptics. Sorry, I really dislike the skeptics of most of the skeptics of the.
Hey, Vincent, can I run this past you? I've had this theory not recently, just the notion that has occurred to me, because Miss Sparkles, me, and if you ever cover like Gray Poupette and Andrew Clark, in
Spit it out, man.
we cover, right? You'll have to look it up. Like Andrew Clark, like there's another guy who comes up, but it's Andrew Clark. Look up like Dane or patterns of behavior. You'll pretty much find him. Gray Poupette's another person I cover. In the people we cover, I was beginning to think, right? And I don't want to name he who should not be named. Isn't it weird leftist accept skepticism and mass conspiracy theories, but if a right person does it, you're considered an awful person?
Yeah, I don't care about that. Okay, of course, they're gonna. The people on the right consider the left skeptics horrible people. It's just gonna happen on both sides.
Well, I
Just
think what I
accept it.
often find is conspiracy theorists are always conspiracy theorists in my book, no matter what aisle you hang on. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah, it's people who just want to affirm, believe whatever confirms their worldview. I mean,
Confirmation bias.
I will always go over fact over. I mean, as much as I like a good conspiracy theory, it's just fun to theorize. I don't take, unless there's actually evidence to back them up, I don't take them seriously. They're just like really cool jokes, like Alex Jones. Okay, you can, if you like, okay, this is just entertainment. I can see people's problems with that. But I was about to go into the skeptics, and Harmful Opinions is back, which I'm finding good. I'm trying to watch some of his content, but he sort of lost his edge since the candidate he kicked out. All the skeptics and Shoe on Head. He went over Shoe on Head, the same one the thinkers went over. You saw me in chat bringing that up. But I'm not going to get into that. That sort of, I was sort of derailing that sort of conversation with being like, yeah, Shoe being with basically Harmful Opinions, autistic opinion, but he has
I mean, if you think about it, I just bring that up because it seems kind of odd now how, somebody I cover, I'm just like, Patrick knows who I'm talking about because he's seen my DM.
Patrick knows nothing. Patrick knows everything and nothing at the same time.
Oh,
He is a cat in a box. Okay.
Oh,
All
that's
wise and all dumb at the same time. Paradox.
We cover these people, and it's like, it's a notion that I have thought of, and it's like, you could be a conspiracy brained person, and I'm just like, I'm fine with that, but don't condemn the other side. It's like they go like, these people take QAnon exists like it's not a fringe ideology. It's like, yes, every Republican believes in QAnon. No. I'm like, because you would agree on that. That's like a hyperbolism, like, or you live in it.
Yeah, this is why I think what
this documentary is tainted. That's why I'll watch it because it's the only one. And then I'll look up the, Miss Sparkles mentioned the Mr. Medicare one. But that taints your work, at least in my opinion.
Yes, it's going to bias you. And conspiracy, skepticism, people consider skepticism. I think you should always go with the facts, provable facts, or at least the closest thing you can to actual facts to counterbalance any worldview on this, because our brains are pretty much just bundles of strings stringed together. So there's plenty of hacks for most people. If you're aware of them, you can combat some of them, but most people don't want to combat them because it can drive you a bit insane, like it did for the skeptics. And I really can't get on the side of the atheist people who were pretty much all the skeptics, because I can't disprove God. I want to believe there's a God personally, but there's really no strong evidence for it. So that's why I'm personally a Gnostic.
I mean, that's an interesting thing because like actual trans people, let's say like I don't know how old Vincent is. I say I'm about 40. Not there
Oh,
yet.
I'm 69 because I like that number. That's my official age,
I
69.
understand. But
Yin and yang, babe. It's not for anything sexual. Okay, it's just for the
what?
because it's
Ah,
like yin and yang. Not
anyways.
not the sexual thing. Go on.
Wow. No, so like let's say a certain number of a population is actually gay. Like if you go to a tribal society, like maybe 15-20% of the population's actually gay. Like I think they've done this story or they don't have interest in the other sex. So but they still have a role in a society. Now, I do believe the trans thing and LGBTQ identity thing, crisis stuff, is its own moral conundrum that needs to be talked about because of the self IDing. And I believe that is so overblown by media. And it's
What's
gotten to the
overblown? Sorry, I'm just clarifying.
she brought up the trans identity thing. I believe that that is an overblown metric because there's a confused population that either wants to accept it because their friends are that way, or it's like oh, if I'm not that way, I'm not going to be accepted or something. It's like a badge of honor someone sticks on their Twitter profile. And are they actually that way? Don't know. It's like in the 90s, we had a bunch of people who were bi, right?
Yeah,
And
metrosexual.
they were bi. And it's like, oh, that just means you have an interest in both sexes. Good on you. You keep your options open. Well, that's wonderful.
I wouldn't say it's wonderful, but I
But you
don't think
do
it's a
you.
horrible thing.
So, anyways, and thank you, Patrick. I know it's late. You got to go do all your
Yeah, man.
sales.
Thanks for
Thank you for
hanging out
stopping
with the
by.
girlfriend and stopping by along our Satanic Panic little start off stream. So any support is appreciated, and we always love. Well, we wish you weren't so busy with the fam and work, but we understand. Seems like Andrew's actually got a promotion, so we're losing him in some capacity to supporting so many responsible adults.
We're going to be we're going to have to do more scripted content.
Well, speak for yourself. I'm trying to stream once a week, either Saturday or Friday night.
You
Keep
know
that
what?
in
I'm trying to
mind,
get
folks.
Gray
Plus
to do
other
that.
stuff.
I'm trying
Plus,
to get
who
Gray to do
knows?
that. So
I'm trying to encourage all my co-patriots to create crazy content on their own. They're generally not as crazy as mine, but
whoa.
It takes types of all sorts.
Well, thank you. And I'm pretty sure, as I say, Miss Sparkles, look up Gray Poupette and Andrew Clark.
Oh, I'm sure.
Check
she
it
knows
out.
something.
Just check it. It's all good.
More for any other audience members. Gray's got a great
Gray has a
voice.
video coming out with LG on Monday.
Yeah, the stripper DJ. Oh, sorry, the DJ for strippers. Okay,
Well,
it's funny to missay that.
Apparently it was a very interesting discussion, and it was apparently he was on that stream earlier. I was telling you that the guy that I was watching.
Yeah, Renown doesn't impress me too much. I mean,
he covers he covers things we cover, but he does it in the worst way. Just saying.
Yeah, I'm not seeing much. I mean, he's just on the grind and he's getting it because he's.
Congrats. I'm not gonna shit on the guy. He got 1,000 subs covering somebody, and I don't want to sit and cover one person on like religiously. We only do it as a response content, okay? But it's not our brand. And see, like Miss Sparkles, I would rather with the people I work with, like with Andrew Clark, we are going to start an ideology series if that interests you. we're going to go into ideologies like left and right, and eventually work our way through the political philosophies, misconceptions of each. And then I have stuff with
I'll stop plugging yourself so much. Do it at the end, okay?
Vincent. You have our projects we want to work on here.
It's better to plug at the end anyways, okay?
Yes.
So let's save that and finish this up. Maybe probably just finish up. How long have we been going?
Harder and harder.
Well, it's a terrific documentary. How I started it is not where I ended, and then I still had a lot more questions. So yes, maybe another two-parter. But where can people find the documentary? Do you have plans for distribution?
We do. We're going to be playing Hot Docs right now. We're finishing our festival run through spring, and then we'll be doing our theatrical run in August, and it'll be
available on CBC starting this fall with a date to be announced. So you can look for like SatanWantsYouFilm.com. We have all the dates if it might be playing at a film festival in your city.
No, it's gonna be hard to find. Maybe pirate
This is gonna
it.
be hard to find.
No, not pirate it. I would never pirate a video.
Don't do this.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, we tried digging this up, right? I said it was on certain sites. It said it was on Tubi. I looked on Tubi. It wasn't there.
Well, he said August. It's still August. Closing August in theaters.
And the thing is, said this was supposed to be on streaming like Tubi, and I'm like, I couldn't find the link for it.
Okay. Well, maybe just investigating why it can't be found might also be interesting. Well, as I said, next week we're going to do commentary
or your region, and also on Instagram. If you want to see all the satanic stuff, follow us on Instagram.
Oh, God.
Sean and Steve. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. This was great.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, just outward. Okay, that was rather rough. There's also another thing, but I would rather just go back to this real quick to wrap up because it seems more factual. I want to see if they even cover the.
You're hovering, wondering if you.
I want to see if they even cover the sort of the Michelle Remembers, or what was the middle school you were talking about, Kimon?
McMartin preschool.
Oh, preschool. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's back to the beginning. I'll just put it halfway through.
Remember anything about an event? Like they don't even remember the event.
Don't you use ad block?
Taken grad.
Because I'm lame.
Professionals claim that if they did not quickly facilitate the apprehension of these dangerous offenders, a special power.
Stranger,
these
you're
intense
late.
reactions.
You should have been
Principally, they were.
sooner. Mysterious stranger is late.
Oh, mysterious stranger. Oh,
welcome,
yeah,
sir.
Hey, mysterious stranger. No matter what sex, even if I know the sex, I'm not going to reveal the mystery of stranger. Yeah. Oh, that was absolutely. I recommend everyone watching Weed Wolf. Watch it. It's a must.
What is that?
It made me laugh. It made me cry. It made me pee my pants.
What is this?
I would rather not get into more details, but it was definitely worth watching.
Is it as bad as a Serbian film?
It was like a Serbian film on probably shrooms, yet better.
You know what? I have a weird love of a lot of weird Magnolia films that they come out with, and the weird, like, they look like hippie throwback films, but you know,
you do you and your yellow submarine. Yes, it was just that good.
You know what? I'm gonna have to educate you with I'm gonna have to make you watch The Life of Brian or The History of the World.
Oh, you don't think I haven't seen those? I've seen both of those. Jeez.
I highly doubt anyone in our group has seen it. Like, we should do the Thinkers on Blazing Saddles.
Okay, yeah, I'll recommend that. Okay, I'm gonna actually run that. I'm
You
gonna
need
run.
to do that.
That's more for the watch party and discussions. Okay, I'm doing
The watch party. That's what I mean.
I'm doing the Encanto. After that, I'm not going to make any more recommendations. I can get behind your Blazing Saddles recommendation or something else good to watch.
It is good.
Yeah, but sometimes Doomer's right about one thing. It's hard to say the good things about something good. Let me skip through this.
Satanic activity. The episode suggested that cinema was the devil's public relations firm. As Satanic Panic really started to take hold, Stranger Danger was also being publicized because child abductions and murders were
Yeah,
constructs.
we went over this.
People started to believe, with the mission being to promote evil and to contaminate a generation with immorality. The main targets of these evildoers were children. Ostensibly, they were committing homicide, kidnapping, and other types of maltreatment. This fictitious epidemic was called, instead of helping, several mental health professionals made things worse. Various psychotherapists, like mental health counselors, social workers, and psychologists, decided to try to find the evil. They thought of themselves as having an amazing ability to detect who was evil and who was not, a special power. They could see hidden bias. They also believed they could convince children.
This guy actually has a good video. It's just, it seems interlaced with like strange things.
Yeah, it's really sorry, it's very bland and
I'm gonna be very honest.
Detailed.
I'm gonna be very honest. Even though I've been around YouTube, and if I were to make videos,
yeah,
even if I were, I would timestamp my videos. But what's the difference, you know?
Huh? I have no clue.
Timestamping, right? It helps, but how do you equate Stranger Danger and stuff in with this? It's like the other people we covered. It looks weird.
No, I get what he's going for. He's trying to say that all the general atmosphere, so he's going through almost every last thing, and he's being extremely fraud about it, like him. I mean, I'm sure Miss Sparkles liked the fact that he brought up two Stephen King's, The Shining and Carrie, as sort of factors in the rise of the Satanic Panic, but those really almost were a critique or a response to the Satanic Panic. It was psychic abilities, not the devil who made them do it. And sometimes, like Misery, the devil's within the obsessed, crazy person. I wonder if Stephen King regrets some of the stuff he's written since he's really gone on the progressive bandwagon.
What do you mean when he did the whole before or after he fell off in the TDS?
Even before he fell off into it, he sort of was.
Well, he was kind of over the whole writing bit for a while because remember, the Dark Tower series was supposed to be his
coup de grace, his grand magnum opus.
Grand exit.
It was a good book series, but I don't think it even comes close to rivaling Lord of the Rings or anything. And
it was supposed to be like, if people aren't familiar with like the Dark Tower series, it was meant to be take into account all of the characters like from his works, put him in like it is referenced. If anyone has remembered The Stand, the Man in Blacks in like the first book, that's Randall Flagg.
Yeah. Sort of like Branderson's sort of cosmonaut. I made a little quicks for fans of the series.
To remember SRA, which would allow these offenders to be prosecuted. The psychotherapists were joined by sociologists, journalists, and law enforcement in their mission to fabricate victims of non-existent crimes. There was a sense of urgency. Mental health professionals claimed that if they did not quickly facilitate the apprehension of these dangerous offenders, the problem could propagate to such an extent it could destroy the world. What kind of courses did these clinicians take in graduate school? Was there one named James Bond Villains and Counseling Strategies? They seemed very focused on world destruction. The mental health professionals spearheaded their campaign by focusing on what they referred to as repressed memories. They didn't let the fact that the concept is not supported by any science discourage them. Logic was not going to stand in their way. The idea behind the repressed memory is if a child doesn't remember anything about an event, like they don't even remember the event happening at all, the clinician implements tactics to help the child find the missing memories. For example, they might make a number of suggestions to the child.
Yeah, begging the question definitely sounds like
okay, this is better. This is what you were looking for.
Yeah. And it's not something I think they'll come up with. Yeah, this is sort of what I originally was looking into the research, and he gets into sort of the nitty gritty without any real details. I would have to do some research into how many people again and what techniques they did, but that might be lost in time also.
They might ask the child to pretend that the narrative provided by the clinician is what actually happened, and they would introduce a wide variety of leading questions. Eventually, the clinician would come to believe that the child is reconstructing the memory, when in reality, the clinician has supplied the narrative to the child. When the child simply repeats the narrative back, the clinician is amazed at how this repressed memory has been unlocked. So they were fascinated that someone could repeat their own words back to them. That is setting the bar pretty low. If they ever had access to a tape recorder, they could have entertained themselves for hours. The memories of children are subject to fantasy, the social environment, cultural influences, and suggestion. The mental health professional.
Okay, this is why he started with the social influences, but that would be more the social influence of the adults. I don't think a lot of these kids, maybe I'm wrong, maybe they did watch all these horror movies that he mentioned in the beginning. I'm just not quite sure
I mean,
where
if
that
you
goes.
watched it's like I brought up It earlier. It kind of, even if you go back and look, the actory way it's portrayed for TV, it's kind of, it's not as creepy as like the new one, but the new one kind of plays off of more, but they had to make it for a TV format. And if you were a kid that watched that, you might develop a fear of clowns after that.
That's always possible. That generally is a cycle that would have to be repeated. You need to generally have a traumatic incident with something, but as a child, you can exaggerate it in your mind. And there's also nightmares that can exacerbate sort of those fears that you see in scary movies.
Like, you can't tell me a kid, if they sit down and watch Poltergeist, right? And they're not going to go look at a TV if they're. That's why there's this concept. You don't show horror films, or you don't show stuff to kids who are underdeveloped.
Yeah, it can affect
With the emotional
their,
context. Like, if you showed a kid Poltergeist and they pull like the little girl into the TV, right? They're going to look at a TV as rather odd.
maybe they would actually not want to watch TV. That might be actually be a good way to.
I have a friend joke, right? One of my friends has a younger daughter, and he's like raising him with his wife. And he jokes with us. He goes, "Yeah, don't you tell her there's monsters in the closet. You'll scare her." I'm like, "Yeah, I would never do that."
Yeah. I mean, it's like Santa Claus. Some children believe in Santa Claus for a long time. And sort of disappointed when you find out your parents lied.
Well,
do you still believe in Santa Claus?
No.
Oh, sure. I don't believe you. No. Professionals should have known this. The information was well established in the research literature at that time. Yet they chose nonsense. A good example of how this technique was used with disastrous consequences is the McMartin preschool incident. It was really one of the most high-profile examples of satanic panic in action. In 1983, the McMartin School in California was the center of a number of false accusations. All of them started from one allegation. It came from the mother of one of the preschool students. The mother's name was Judy Johnson. Even though the allegations were unfounded, law enforcement vigorously attempted to find other complaining witnesses. They sent this letter home with all the other students that essentially told parents that this person had been arrested at the school and they should see if their child had experienced something like that going on. They were kind of putting ideas in the heads of the parents.
Okay. Yeah, I can see how this could have spread.
You see, this is why I left you with those other videos, like the one, the one that would like the Dateline specials.
Yeah.
Of this, and it went in deeper with it, and one was relatively recent because I found the name of the one, and it makes sense, I guess, if that's for people.
Well, I want people to experience all these videos with us. So, I mean, they probably aren't going to watch this whole freaking long live stream unless they've been here the whole time. And who has time for all the live streams? But it's there in case
Your
people want to
metrics
backlog, in case our sort of our sort of probe and investigation gets into it. I can also edit some of the stuff down later on.
You can always do the streams and the edit. You're kind of known for long form videos. You're not.
I'm on the medium side. I try to keep it down in comparison to other people. I try to pare things down, but I still end up going long.
Well, you have not so much shorts. It's like channels that get known for shorts versus people who get known for short form content. Then you get the people who do it, and then there's the broadcast side. It's like your stuff. Let's say you do one stream a week and a couple of videos a week. You know.
Yeah. Sheesh. 2 hours on Eric debunks misses everything, but that was interesting. I didn't want to pare that down too much. That was really the bread and butter.
Psychotherapists using the repressed memory technique I talked about before managed to elicit false accusations at an astounding rate. Eventually, several members of the McMartin family and teaching staff were charged with hundreds of criminal counts. By 1984, there were 360 children.
1984, the time of misinformation. Sorry, the book title with that.
Who claimed they were victims of crimes at the daycare. None of them reported crimes when interviewed initially. It was always on the subsequent interviews. This technique, of course, the repressed memory technique, was being employed.
And pause it and talk. I wanted to talk anyways. Thank you, commercial. Why need ad block when I can just pause and the jibber jabber when I need to jibber jabber anyways?
You know, eventually, supposedly, if the rumor is true, we might not have ad block anymore.
Oh, there's a Canadian psychologist right there.
You know,
possibly, yeah.
I don't want to say that people, if they aren't aware, at this time or in the future, YouTube is supposedly considering going after ad block.
I can understand why. They get more people in red and probably get more money for the content creators.
But then again, you know, YouTube can rampantly put commercials in anything they so please.
Yep. I'm going to just let him talk. I'm looking over this transcript just because I'm getting tired of this. I mean, it's interesting information, but the way he's formatted
You could have gone fast through the transcript if it's in the video, though.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not seeing anything serious here. Not trying to keep these streams too long that they look irrepressible to people.
You know what? I just use ad block on my thing. And then
here. I'm just going to go with Chuck
Norris.
Norris.
Of course, had nothing to do with the school. He was never. One child even identified Chuck Norris as one of the offenders.
That
Chuck
is
Norris,
great.
of course, had nothing to do with the school. He was never there.
That is very awesome.
This
is why going through the transcript.
That's good. That's and what Chuck Norris was still like a B movie. What is it? God, was he Lone Wolf by then? I looked at him. I gotta look this up. God, what was
They
his?
actually have this search feature now. That's pretty cool.
Oh, transcripts? Yeah, it's.
I didn't know it was in there.
It's in there. Hold on. Let me see his. Oh, he said about 1984. What he had been with? Yeah, he was in Forced Silent Rage, Forced Vengeance, Lone Wolf McQuade, and Missing in Action. He was doing the where he's the commando. What is it? Missing in Action. I know you've seen these. These were all prior.
Probably Commando.
When he is the commando, like Missing in Action, Lone Wolf McQuade.
A lot of stuff.
The children also said they saw some of the staff members flying. One child even identified Chuck Norris as one of the offenders. Chuck Norris, of course, had nothing to do with the school. He was never there. Even with these fanciful stories, prosecutors went forward with the case. Many innocent people spent years in jail as they defended against these unfounded allegations. Eventually, it was discovered that Judy Johnson had schizophrenia, and her accusations were actually part of a delusion.
Okay. Fair enough. I don't know why they took the claims so seriously. You generally want to have evidence. Remember, believe all women, people. their colleagues voice skepticism drowned out by sensationalism. I mean, all this is. I would want to see the other side of this.
But their voices of skepticism were drowned out by the sensationalism of the accusations. Satanic panic affected many people from across the United States and the United Kingdom. Eventually, it would die out in the mid-1990s. There were other trials related to satanic panic in various places that did result in false convictions. Satanic panic was a failure that negatively affected a large number of people.
Is he even going to bring this back to a regular cancel culture? I'm curious about that. All right, Satanic panic, the cancel culture of the 80s. Should actually look into this guy more. See what other videos he has. This is 2 years ago. Is he a good actor? A unbiased actor, as this video would sort of indicate? Or is he just being like, oh, cancel culture nowadays? This is real cancel culture. This is sort of like the woman who tweeted the thing about Africa and not getting AIDS. She's white, and her coming back to people canceling her. Or you have the Canadian trucker protest where some really dubious actions were taken. Now, maybe some of those cases, but going after people's banks with a government order seems to be an issue. Does he talk about the trans stuff? Sorry, I'm not paying attention. I'm horrible. I guess she's Mrs. Sparkle.
The action is always
Talk about
disproportionate
Jordan
to the
Peterson.
problem. That's a key feature of moral panic. As ridiculous as the satanic panic appears to people now, cancel culture will appear to people in the future. But that's always the case with moral panic. Few people can see it at the time. The fear of the alleged offenders is greater than the fear of making false allegations.
Okay, he briefly goes over it. He's saying the cancel culture of today, of nowadays, will seem crazy to people in the future. And I'm hoping that's true. As long as we don't go down that well. False allegations, you should be able to prove it. But there's sometimes some unprovable things that I would call red flags. Like some people, I can't actually accuse them of anything directly, but they exhibit enough of these red flags that I am wary of them. And I will be like, okay, I'm not going to accuse you of anything, but this shit is weird that you're doing.
You're sus as a...
Yeah, sus. I'm not going to say someone's a groomer or perverted or all this stuff. Like, I don't use the term groover or any of that stuff, but I can definitely say, you know what? Both some of these crazy QAnon or Nazi-ist right-wingers, even if they just show the signs like Nick Fuentes, I can treat him as sus in many different ways. Hell, it's almost provable that he's really far gone, but he hides his power level and only slips his mask a few times and blah, blah, blah. Same thing with the leftists, okay? But I'm not technically a centrist. I'm just anti-insane far anyone on the fringes. Except for, I probably have a soft spot for the fringe on the freedom side, anarchists. I don't give them as much flack, even if I think their ideas are fundamentally flawed, because we need laws. But you know what? If we were great, perfect beings, anarchy would actually be the best government, because everyone would be perfect and not do any wrong with it.
It is theorized that one of the reasons that moral panic discontinues is because the feedback loop becomes broken. News outlets simply stop reporting on the topic, and people lose interest. These days, with social media being the source of news for so many, we have an endless supply of moral panic content to fuel cancel culture far into the future. Who knows when cancel culture will die out? It may turn out to be the most persistent moral panic in history. Those are my thoughts on moral panic, including satanic panic and cancel culture.
Yeah, not bad. A little generalized. Got into the details where he needs to. I think some of his movie examples seemed a little odd, but you know what? They probably played into it even if it wasn't the Satanic panic. But yeah, that seems like a good place to end. Let's have you plug yourself.
Wow.
Yeah, plug your ideas. I'm a boring ass person. I even had a video.
You tease what you're doing next week.
Hmm?
I'm gonna tease what you're doing next week.
What am I doing next week? Oh, the commentary. Yeah, we'll be back here. I'll try to do Friday to see if I can get more numbers. Saturday night, I'm switching between Friday and Saturday. I did a stupid little stream on Wednesday because I sort of felt I needed to address something real quickly. Sometimes it needs to happen. It's a video now. It actually came out. The cope of cry bully kurtosis. I did like a 2-hour stream going over the stupid tweets, and I wouldn't recommend anyone actually watch it if you want to have brain cells, but it's for the stupid people who want to keeping on being ignorant. I lay my information out there, and there's a lot of bullshit and really stupid logic out there. But yeah, we're doing commentary. I do have some roots in that. I used to make fun of commentary channels. Although some of those are hidden. Some of my early stuff is interesting. I think so. And some of it's hidden.
I don't recommend it. But then again, I am a casual enjoyer of the horrors of humanity to a degree, so I can learn from it. Because the thing going over the commentary community, I often find is you have to find there is some misinformation or dissociation because you got to go into the beginning when Leafy is here, when H3H3 was actually a decent human being. And
he's sort of making a comeback with that.
Trying to be a decent?
Oh, just going against Hassan and calling him out.
Like Pyrocynical was big and all that. And then it changed with the first or second Adpocalypse, about 16.
I probably just got too tired and just wanted to. Actually, what he's doing is actually harder nowadays. I don't know why he switched over. Same thing with iDubbbz. Probably go over his history. I even have a video on him.
Well, it's funny. I will say this: if you're Miss Sparkles, if you look into like iDubbbz, right? Like people don't understand. People use it. Go look at like Turkey Tom video and others, and like look at old iDubbbz and iDubbbz as he currently is. And this was like prior to his girlfriend. You're just like, oh, you destroyed your channel. It's like a person we know hangs out with Matt Jarbo. The story of Matt Jarbo, who was big, got himself into drama, and then nuked his entire back catalog so he can never come back. Now he basically delivers Uber Eats half the week.
Oh, supposedly same thing with Rice Gum. Not Rice Gum, sorry. Who was that?
Rice
Death
Gum
Noodles. No, I'm thinking Death Noodles, sorry.
Doesn't Death Noodles have a studio?
Yeah, but supposedly there was rumors he did stuff like Rice Gum. I mean, yeah, Uber Eats, sorry. But yeah, I got involved. Actually, I wouldn't recommend going into commentary. I'll try to make that stream a little bit fun and
make it
informative.
fun. It's certain.
That's going to be a sort of break from this. I mean, I tried to make this a little bit fun with some of my stuff, but I want to take it overall serious because I think this is a good topic that sadly enough, not enough people will probably care about to really dive into. But you know what? I don't do things based on what's popular or what other.
I say follow. I say try to follow your metrics, but that's all
it's within my wheelhouse. I think it's not too far out
because it's like when I worked with Gray and I wanted to set up something today. It's like, oh, but he wants to do it at a certain time. I'm like, oh, okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Him and Andrew have similar metrics, so it's like they want to put. So I want to do a live, so Miss Sparkles, I want to do like a live broadcast, like a discussion with questions and editorial style, but he has to put it like at like Pacific time. So that's like, because I'm CST, so that's like 12 or 1 o'clock. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Well,
Pretty
thank
narrowly
you for coming.
They're small.
Thank you for coming. I'm going to wind this down. Okay.
You just got to remember, YouTube, this is just a hobby. You don't go into this thinking you're going to make millions of dollars. There's no more Jacksepticeyes.
Yeah, I meant, sheesh. I just aim for having a fun time and maybe learning something, but I'm very skeptical. on
Now,
that.
as long as you don't become like DSP, we're all good.
Yeah, nothing really bothers me. I have videos made on me. I laugh them off. I have idiotic comments. I laugh them off. Oh, okay. Well, that's the end of the stream. Thank you for coming, especially Miss Sparkles. We don't have much of a night crew here. Even Patrick sort of went to bed, and Gray's probably busy. But
Patrick is a response. He gets off.
We're going to keep at it. Well, I'm going to keep at it. Timon is welcome to join me, as well as anyone else who wants to weigh in on the subject matters. There will be a max limit at some point, but I always like to find new, interesting people to talk to. So, stay classy, YouTube. Bye.
See you.